Welcome to the Fantasy Fangirls podcast, where two sisters dive deep into beloved fantasy lore, characters, themes, theories, and more.
I'm Lexi.
And I'm Nicole.
And today we are so excited to be covering chapters 42 through 48 of A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas, aka it's the highly anticipated High Lords meeting episode. As always, let's start with our content warnings. While we're focusing today's discussion on this stretch of chapters and ACOWAR, these episodes do include spoilers for the entire ACOTAR series. These deep dives do not, however, have spoilers for the rest of Sarah J. Maas's series. No Maas vs. Madness today, folks. There's just too much else to discuss.
So with all of that said, if you don't know that we're about to uncover some serious family drama within the Autumn and the Day Court, then please go finish the books. We will be here when you're done.
Next, we Fantasy Fangirls are adults who say adult things about adult books. In other words, friends, this podcast is rated R.
Tamlin. He gets an FU count in this episode, and I am not censoring it. So please do be mindful of those little listening ears.
Additionally, we are so excited to see you at upcoming live events.
We cannot wait for our Fantasy Fangirls live show at Comedy Works South in Denver this October 20th. VIP tickets are sold out. They sold out like instantly, which is insane. But there are still some general admission tickets available. So if you're thinking about being there with us for our first standalone live show, we highly recommend grabbing those tickets soon.
We'll also be influencer partners at the Swords and Shadows Masquerade by Mountains of Magic in Highlands Ranch, Colorado on November 23rd.
You can also dance the night away with us at the Fantastique Collection's New Year's Eve drop party in Denver, Colorado. Tickets and information to all of the events we just listed are in the show notes.
And lastly, if you love Fantasy Fangirls and have been loving this ACOTAR series journey we're on together, if you want more content, more community, more events, and just more all around, please check out our Patreon.
We have 3 membership tiers that you can join. Number 1, the Valkyries, which includes access to our Boppin' Discord, live Q&As from Lexi and I, community events, book club, promo codes for live events, plus 20% off discounted and special merch, all for $5 a month. You can also join the High Fae, which includes everything from the Valkyrie level, plus early access to ad-free episodes, our full episode outlines, and special voting privileges. That's for $10 a month. And last but not least, we have our newest and highly requested tier, the Inner Circle, which includes everything from the other 2 tiers, plus lots of behind-the-scenes content. They got a lot of Lexi and I making the High Lords meeting outline this week, behind-the-scenes content. You also get a special welcome gift, giveaways, a private Discord channel, name shouted out on the podcast, and that is for $25 a month.
Join the party at patreon.com/fantasyfangirls. The link is also in the show notes. And really and truly, thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts for supporting us as we've turned this independent podcast into our livelihood. It's all because of you.
And now it is time to head to the Dawn Court for the High Lords meeting.
As always, Nicole's going to kick us off with this episode by summarizing what happens in ACOWAR chapters 42 through 48. I see her rolling up her sleeves already right now. All right, let's do this.
This was the hardest Inner Circle debrief I've ever done in my career of a fantasy fangirl. Wow.
All right, well, let's do this. Gather round, friends. We need Nicole's ultimate Inner Circle debrief.
I don't know if we need to gas it up that much. Chapter 42. It's the meeting day, and it looks like we've got a +1. Nesta is joining the party, even getting a new title in the process, Emissary to the Human Lands. You've been replaced, Fae-vorite darling. As everyone readies to winnow to the meeting, Cassian approaches Nesta, which causes Snoopy Reese to halt and eavesdrop on their reunion, and it's very Cassian and Nesta. But enough butting into other people's business. We've got a party to get to the Dawn Court, and oh, what a beautiful morning. It's stunning. And as they prepare to enter, Reese reminds our High Lady that she bows to no one except for this dick. Chapter 43. Walking into the chamber where the meeting will be held, we meet the High Lords of Dawn, Day, and Winter, the people who basically bothered to show up on time. And though this meeting is of dignity, pristine duty, and seriousness, 2 females, Moore and Vivian, Lady of the Winter Court, squeal, reunite, and catch up on decades of gossip, including her mating with Kallias. Fashionably late, Tarquin and Baron finally joined, and let's get down to business. But what's that? Bursting in, Kool-Aid Man style, is Man Bear Pig Oh yeah! Chapter 44. This Kool-Aid man is not so cool. Not only did he not RSVP, but is expecting a seat anyway, he is also staring daggers into Rhys and Feyre. But boy, oh boy, is he just getting started. Let's get down to business. Reprise. But it's clear from the get-go, not a lot is going to happen at this meeting because Tamlin is starting what I'm going to call today the fuck you Tamlin count. Who else is not having Tamlin's fuckery though? It is be careful how you speak about my high lady. Asriel, high lady? Surprise, Tamlin. Conversation moves to Rhys proving his good intentions to the other High Lords, including Khalees, who believed Rhys had a part in murdering 24 Winter Court children. Things check out with Rhys though. What about you, Tamlin? You're supposed to be working with Hybern. Surprise! He's been a spy all along. Duh, Feyre. Tamlin didn't come empty-handed though. In addition to a smart mouth, he also actually brought useful information of Hybern's movements. But don't think for one moment that means he's gonna stop being a dick. Nope, he opens his stupid Tambert pig mouth, but it looks like Rhys has had enough as well, so he took away his ability to speak. Oh shit! There's a Daemati among us, chapter 45. Well, that sure ruffles some feathers, not the kind Thesan likes though. Tensions turn away from the High Lord of the douche canoe, of the Spring Court, to the Autumn Court, including I'm totally on your side Eris, who calls out more for dressing like a slut. Nope, too far, Eris. Asriel pounces like a kitty cat from shadowy hell and absolutely hands Eris his own ass. Looks like it's up to the High Lady of the Night Court to diffuse the tension. Beeson, being like, can we get back to politics, please? Brings in his skilled alchemist, Nuon, for the grand reveal. They've got something to counteract Faebane. That should diffuse the tension and make people start acting rationally, right? Nope. Baron, bringing a fuck you Baron count into the mix, starts to run his mouth and white hot fire explodes out of Feyre, chapter 46. So remember that whole I won't show the High Lords my power convo? Yep, that went out the window. Feyre, like a queen, unleashes on Baron and only stops her attempt to kill him when Rhys, reminding her that, well, an interesting experiment. Let's maybe not kill a High Lord at the meeting we're supposed to be the good guys at. Baron insulted that girl has his powers, and let's be real, he's a little embarrassed that said girl absolutely decimated him, turns to leave. However, he is halted by Queen Nesta, who stands up and tells her story. Alas, it is not enough to keep this uber douche canoe in the meeting. Baron and the rest of the Autumn Court leave. Good riddance. Phew, that's over. But now the High Lords are looking at Feyre and her powers like, hey, that's mine. Feyre begins her impassioned speech about fighting for Hybern, and it's enough to make them change their mind and join the fight. 6 out of 7. Not bad, Cursebreaker. Not bad at all. Chapter 47. Sleepover at the Dawn Court. In a private suite, our Night Court crew has a quick moment of relaxing after a long day. It's like their equivalent of taking your bra off at the end of the day. However, who enters but expert bra taker offer Helion himself? And it turns out that he's been working for an Inner Circle threesome for years now. To quote Feyre, why haven't they said yes? Feyre dons on her meddling mask though and starts to ask Helion about his past with the Lady of the Autumn Court. Turns out they had an off and on affair for decades, ending with her choosing to stay with the Autumn Court and Baron. Feyre, doing some quick mental math, puts some who's your daddy pieces together. Lucian is his son. Helion, you are the father! No time to be surprised though, because Nesta comes in. Something is wrong. I think I left the oven on at home! The Bat Boys go searching though, and no oven appears to be on. At the end of the day, Rhys and Feyre have a quick chat, ending with her saying that she cannot bang bang bangity bang with you here, Rhys, so he snuggity snuggles her all night long. Chapter 48. Day 2. The next morning, in the sweet dining room, Moore is not looking like a female who went on her own bang bang bangity bang session with Helion last night. But let's get down to business again. Back in the reflection pool room, it looks like everything's going to be drama-free for the day. Until Nesta leaps up out of her chair, hurls in the reflection pool, just as a rumble reverberates throughout the land. The cauldron has taken down the wall. They are too late. Dun dun dun!
Oh dear! Friends, you know us well, which means you also know that we are always excited to get our next page-turning fantasy read to cure our book hangover. And we also love supporting local bookstores.
That is why we are so excited to partner with bookshop.org. Whether you're searching for your next fantasy novel to dive into, or a hot thriller, or one of those steamy romances, bookshop.org has just the book you're looking for. When you shop with bookshop.org, you can choose an independent bookstore, whether in your neighborhood or across the country, to directly support with your purchase. Feel even better about buying books online with bookshop.org, knowing that your money is directly supporting independent bookstores.
This is such an incredible concept. concept. Like, Nicole and I really love this. In just over 4 years, bookshop.org has raised over $32 million for local bookstores. Bookshop.org and us believe that local bookstores are essential community hubs that foster culture, curiosity, and a love for reading, and we're committed to helping them survive and thrive. Plus, bookshop.org is a certified B Corp and was named Best for the World by B Labs. In fact, Nicole, one of the bookshops that it directly supports is that one off of Main Street that we visited a few months ago, where I bought my Throne of Glass book.
Yes, I love that. And of course, we have a great deal on books that support your local bookstores. Huzzah all around. Use code FF to get 10% off your next order at bookshop.org. That's bookshop.org, BOOKSHOP.org, and use code FF to get 10% off your next order. Huzzah for bookshop.org!
It's time to step into the cauldron and discuss key insights, character analysis, lore, foreshadowing, theories, and so much more. And Nicole, I have to say, as we get started today, I'm pretty sure I owe you an apology, because as we were mapping out the chapter breakdown for each ACOWAR episode, feels like way back when, I think I remember you insisted we include chapter 42 in last week's episode 6. But I was like, no way, there's way too much in that episode. You know, I was thinking like with the prison and stuff like that, we got to push it to the High Lord's meeting. And now after reading chapter 42, I'm like, oh, yeah, that would have flowed better in episode 6. So here we are in episode 7 and covering chapter 42.
I forgive you. And as our wonderful person, Hannah Montana, says, everybody makes mistakes. Everybody has those days.
I love that you're a Hannah Montana girl and I was a Lizzie McGuire girl.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I do love some What Dreams Are Made Of by Lizzie McGuire. Don't get me wrong.
So let's open it with Nesta surprising everyone by stating she is coming to the High Lord's meeting to tell her story. She explains that she doesn't want to be remembered as a coward. It's up to her to represent the humans, to fight for the humans because no one else cares. Quote, but I do, she says. Feyre's response to Nesta's decision and even her reasoning, I won't lie, I'm a little disappointed in our girl. And I don't think that's going to be the first time I say that this episode. She was the one who initially told, not asked, Nesta that she was going to do this for the High Lord's meeting. She reflected later that it was the wrong thing to push Nesta on, knowing how vulnerable this would be for her and feeling bad that she overlooked its emotional impact on her sister. So with that context, I can't understand why Feyre is now insisting Nesta doesn't have to do this. She is haunted by the idea of, quote, making her sister do something that she is uncomfortable with. But this is also Nesta's choice, her decision to do what she can contribute, and she's being very clear with that. So stop coddling her, Feyre, and attempting to make Nesta second guess this courageous decision.
I do wonder if after seeing what she saw at the Battle of Adriata, she's like, uber, I want my sisters as far away from this war as possible. So I wonder if that's clouding her judgment a little bit.
Maybe.
That seems like something she would have at the forefront of her brain, though, and thus readers would have at the forefront of the page. So this also could just be Feyre being a little wishy-washy, which is not the first time I feel like
I just think that it goes back to what Amryn said, like, don't act like Tamlin here. Like, don't make their decisions for them is what she's really trying to say. And I'm not saying that she isn't being a Tamlin here. And she is also trying to coddle her sister when her sister is being very clear with her own intentions and her decisions. That's what I'm trying to say.
You're going to have some hot takes today, Lexi. I can already feel this. I can already feel this in my bones. So Rhys says that because Feyre got promoted to High Lady, she is no longer allowed to be the emissary of the Night Court to the human lands. So he offers the job to Nesta. Now, it is no secret that Nesta is not Rhysand's favorite person in the room. He does not love her attitude, and he still really hasn't forgiven her for what happened when her and her sisters were in poverty. So why would Rhys give her a position in his own court and thus really his inner circle as well? I think the number one reason is that he sees Nesta in this moment stepping up and being courageous and choosing courage. And as a result, he wants to help her continue down that path and really embrace this new choice of bravery because he thinks that will help her get rid of her shit attitude, really.
And I also think that he really recognizes her sincerity when it comes to helping the humans. And he wants to help her facilitate that and have that outlet there. There's also the line where Feyre notices, quote, some spark flared in Nesta's face. Like her younger sister, Nesta needs a goal and purpose. And Rhys recognizes that in her and wants to help her embrace having a bigger purpose in life in this war.
He also sees her being really vulnerable when originally that is what she wanted to avoid at all costs, and why Nesta originally told Feyre, absolutely not, I'm not doing this. Rhys is also about to go to this meeting knowing that he needs to be vulnerable in a new way with the High Lord of the Night Court mask officially off. So he sees that courage, that vulnerability reflected in Nesta too. We are going to talk endlessly, especially in Silver Flames, of how similar Rhys and Nesta are. And here is just one example. So he reaches out his hand to her and she does take it. She says, quote, consider this meeting a trial basis and I'll make you pay out the teeth for my services. Classic.
Last thing to note before we head to the Dawn Court. Cassian and Nesta, of course. This is their first time seeing one another since the Adriata battle. And who can forget how worried Nesta was when he wasn't right there with the others when they returned? Because, he was talking to the families of the fallen soldiers.
It is interesting because up until this moment where they do have that semi-privacy, I'll call it, Cassian is actively not looking at Nesta, just as Nesta is actively not looking at Cassian. They're both kind of ignoring each other. And I don't know. I wanted to ask your question, like, what do you think about this? Why do you think they do this?
I think she doesn't want to look at him and make it seem like she's asking for his permission or leaning on him for his approval of her decision. Like Feyre notes, quote, Nesta surveyed us all, her gaze jumping past Cassian, not to slight him, but avoid answering the look he was giving her, approval, more. I believe this more that she is referring to is pride. He also influenced her change of heart. Yes, Feyre went to battle for a court who hates her because it was the right thing to do, but so did Cassian and the rest. War and battle are not a distant thing anymore, as Nesta points out. She was so worried for his safety, and that brought war right to her doorstep in a way that even her sister going off doesn't do. And I think she knows Cassian knows that and needs to finish this conversation with her sister before giving him her attention and, in her own way, letting him in.
Wow, your answer was a lot better than mine. Because the only thing I could think of until hearing you say this now is, that game that I think most people used to play with people you had a crush on, where it was like the who can care less game, which, by the way, never works out well. Never play that game. It was a terrible idea. It was a bad time in my life, at least. But I didn't see them as these kinds of people. So that's why it kind of gave me pause. But I love your reasoning here. That makes so much sense.
Nesta says, quote, you didn't come to, and then she stops herself, which we can presume she was going to say, come to see me. Of course, she's talking to Cassian here. There is so much weight in the unspoken words between these two, like usual. But this interaction is more, I'll say, mutual than usual, where they are equally coming together. Cassian takes her hand and they interlace fingers. Their gazes don't break from one another. It is quite the intimate moment between these two, versus the usual verbal sparring, or Nesta ignoring Cassian's attempts at conversation, or even when she is in dire need and just automatically goes to him. This is a shared emotional exchange in front of everybody else too, which is specifically a big deal for Nesta, who always has her walls up. Quote, there was no warmth, no tenderness on either of their faces, only that raging intensity, that blend of contempt and understanding and fire. Yep, that summarizes their mated couple very well. During all of this, we have more third wheeling, which again, we've talked a lot about how this budding romance impacts her as she begins to lose Cassian. He doesn't even look at Moore as he reaches for her to take him and Nesta to the Dawn Court, symbolizing how he really is moving on from her as he focuses on his future, Nesta. And don't worry, Nesta, next time he will come to say hello. Yeah, you will, Cassian.
That was such a satisfying moment to read when he is fully fixed on Nessa and just literally hands his blindly hands his hand back to Moore. You and I both have some very strong feelings about Moore this episode. In my opinion, deserved. It was totally deserved to be ignored. I also think that he realizes how much Nesta needs the reassurance from him that he sees her and cares for her and about her knowing that he is safe. And I think maybe that's not intentionally, maybe it is intentionally, but I think it's that soul bonded nudge that he knows that from. And by him not looking at Moore, it's the, hey, you need to butt out of this nudge as well. Because let us not forget, the last time Nesta was with Moore, Mor snapped at Nesta, being like, keep your forked tongue behind your teeth. Now, to be fair, Nesta has not been very kind to Cassian. Mor is protecting her friend. I'm not saying that like one person is at fault and one person's the golden child here. But here is Nesta getting that reassurance that Cassian wants to spend time with her, or even wants to just be in her presence, even knowing that the forked tongue can come out at any moment.
Exactly. He's not afraid of all of Nesta, and he embraces all of this fire that she is, and he wants her to know that.
This is making me so excited for Silver Flames. Like, I'm so excited.
Part of me is like, oh my gosh, are we going to have anything to talk about when we get to Silver Flames? Because we're talking about it so much here. And it's like, I don't think we're going to have that problem.
I will have many things to talk about, specifically in dining rooms. I also do want to point out that as this is happening, Rhys halts his winnowing to stay and watch this encounter. We give Feyre so much shit for being nosy, but wow, her mate can also be just as bad.
Okay, playing devil's advocate here. They are having a moment in front of everybody. Would you not also be totally guilty of stopping everything? Because I know I would be. I would stop everything that I'm doing and watch this unfold too.
I absolutely would, but should I mind my own business? Yeah, probably. Because they're also having this moment as everyone's leaving. But then everyone like stops and watches, except for Azriel, who's like, I got shit to do. Goodbye. But we've got a meeting to get to. So our crew, finally not eavesdropping anymore, winnows to the Dawn Court. And I'm just going to take I'm going to take the mic for a second to appreciate the absolute masterpiece that is the Dawn Court. The cobalt sky is filled with rosy remnants of sunrise. A dewy freshness still fills the air, quote, as we peered up at the mountain palace spiraling into the heavens above. And what a palace it is! Crafted of what looks like golden stone that holds 1,000 sunrises in it. The palace has grand balconies, archways, verandas, and bridges, all linked to domes and towers of periwinkle morning glories climbing up the pillars, plus a drop-off ledge of rock covered in pale roses and magenta peonies. Yep, you guessed it. It's time for Plant Watch. Morning glories themselves mean love and gratitude, but periwinkle morning glories symbolize wealth, nobility, royalty, and beauty. Pale roses symbolize grace and gratitude, and peonies symbolize prosperity and good luck. And in China and Japan, they are known as the king of flowers and are often used during the Chinese New Year. Considering that many people in the Dawn Court hail from Xi'an, which Xi'an is actually a real place and it's one of the largest cities in central China, we also have bridges that are covered in wisteria vines, which are deeply rooted in Japanese culture, symbolizing love and longevity. So as our crew walks towards the palace on their way up to the meeting, they pass by open-aired chambers filled with silk pillows and plush carpets, plus fountains of the clearest water and urns overflowing with lavender. Lavender plant watch time. Lavender represents peace, silence, and calm. Checks out. I want to live here. And honestly, it makes so much sense that even Nesta is walking all over the place with like awe all over her face. This place sounds magical. But I do have a question for you, Lexi. This is the Dawn Court. I'm assuming everyone's a morning person here. What time do you think they wake up in the Dawn Court?
I mean, I'll be honest. I would be excited to wake up at dawn too here. Like, it's beautiful.
That's great.
I would just sit on one of those balconies in this palace. I'd sip my coffee. Like, that sounds delightful. Also, I bet you they have the best coffee here too.
Oh, yeah. Or tea. They feel like tea people here. I feel like
they might be tea people.
Drinkers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also love how much this territory has multiple small cities that specialize in tinkering, clockwork, and clever things. I don't know why that feels so fitting. Maybe because of the stigma that in order to be successful and make the most of productivity, you have to wake up early to kickstart your morning routine, you know? So I that's what I paired with that. Seriously though, why does the Dawn Court not get more love? Sure, we may not all be morning people, but this court is amazing and smart and inclusive and beautiful. Damn it. Am I switching courts again? At this point, I'm just a Prithian nomad who belongs to all the courts, except for spring, because allergies. And you know what? There's pretty flowers in all of the other courts too.
I would be a nomad with everywhere except for winter. Like, I'll visit winter to go skiing once every like 10 years and call it good. Like,
you don't ski.
I know. That's why it's once every 10 years. But That is all just the walk into the meeting room. The High Lords are convening in a large room with a circular reflection pool in the center, laden with pink and gold water lilies, and around the pool are deep cushioned oak chairs, even some shaped to accommodate wings.
Which makes sense because the Dawn Court is home to the peregrines, which are one of the few winged fairy species. They have bird-like wings with feathers. Get it? Because birds wake up with the sun and are most active at dawn. I love it. It's just so fitting that the Dawn Court has bird-like winged fairies while the Night Court has the Illyrians with their bat-like wings. I just love the little details so much. Every High Lord here has their own approach and strategy to this meeting, plus their own reasons for being here. So let's walk through each of the High Lords to set the stage for this meeting where they all have to come together.
I also want to just note how every single one of them, they all normally have like a damper on their power, right? They've lifted it just a little bit for the meeting. And it's just like, what a peacock moment.
So first, we have our lovely host, Thiessen, High Lord of the Dawn Court.
Thiessen is dressed in flowing pants and a tight tunic, not unlike the outfits that Amren favors. His skin is dark brown and has upswept eyes, which are his loveliest feature. His hair is kissed with gold as if the sunrise had permanently touched it. Feyre, after meeting Nuwan, who, like Thiessen, has family who hail from Xi'an, will wonder if Amren chose the Fae form of someone who also hailed from Xi'an or has Xi'an lineage.
It's important to note that he was not around during the last war 500 years ago, so we can assume he was at minimum not an adult yet, and he definitely was not High Lord then. But he was High Lord when Amarantha took over, so he was one of the High Lords who fell for her initial charm. He was able to protect this palace, assumably by casting a protective spell over it with the last kernels of his magic, like recent Khalees did with Valaris and the city Vivian safeguarded.
Thiessen is surrounded by winged Fae, the peregrines, who are distantly related to the seraphim. If the seraphim are like the angels of this world, the peregrines are like the birds. There is one male, however, who stands just a tad closer to Thiessen than the others, who is the captain of his aerial legion and Thiessen's lover. We never learn his name, or at least we have yet to learn it, I'll say. Thiessen's strategy for this meeting is quite simple. He wants to get shit done. He is ready to get down to business. He is in solution mode, and he does not have much room for everyone's emotional drama. He's got one particular surprise up his sleeve, which is that his master tinkerer and alchemist, Nuwan, has an anecdote for Faebane. More on that later, though. So he's just really like waiting this entire meeting of like, when's a good time to do my surprise? Like, I'll find out. Thiessen is best known for being neutral in conflict, and honestly, we see that all over the pages here. But, however, being a solar court, he is most likely to ally with the other solar courts of day and night. Does this mean that he likes our night crew? Not in the same way that Helion, I'd say, enjoys the night crew, and especially not as he enjoys the night crew later. In fact, Feyre even wonders that if they were led up the stairs to this meeting as an insult, and if others were not led up the same stairs. Now, whether that is true or not, we never learn. But I think that's just how you get up to the meeting. I don't think that was like an insult.
I agree.
I think Feyre's just a little touchy right now.
Then we have Khalees, High Lord of the Winter Court. His skin is so pale it looks frozen. Let it go. He has white hair and crushing blue eyes that are like chips hewn from a glacier. I just love these descriptions of the High Lords that really embody their court. He wears a jacket of royal blue with collar and sleeves lined with white rabbit fur and fur-lined knee-high brown boots. His clothing seems like he'd get far too warm for the summer climate, but hey, we can guess that his blood runs frozen. The Winter Court Fae are built for winter, folks. Remember that he originally wanted to bring armed guards to this meeting, illustrating his mistrust specifically of Rhys. But instead, he has only 3 people with him, including his mate Vivian. Don't worry, we'll get to her shortly. We also have to keep in mind that Khalees is a fairly new High Lord, crowned about 40 years ago while under the mountain after his predecessor was murdered by Amarantha for rebelling a decade after she took over. Winter Court had a lot of casualties under her reign, and Khalees is a little uptight about all of it, understandably. But despite these tensions, we immediately get the sense that Khalees has somewhat of a dry sense of humor, and he is a decent guy based on his quips about his bubbly mate. Quote, I tried to suggest she stay at home, but she threatened to freeze my balls off. I mean, anytime someone can joke about balls, I like them. Plus, there are several more where all of this illustrates that he's rather approachable, except he definitely has his guard up against Rhys. And to be honest, for good reason. There have been tensions between Kallias and Rhys because he has been under the understandable assumption that Rhys was responsible for the murder of 24 winter children last year. A big reason why Kallias and Vivian are here today is to see for themselves if Rhys is indeed trustworthy and to hear his side of the story. They are here with open yet tentative minds because they really do want to fight against Hybern and never let their people suffer the way that they did under Amarantha. And they have good reason to be cautious of the Night Court in particular.
Next, we have everyone's favorite Always Sunny character, Helion, High Lord of Day, who doesn't seem very High Lord of Sunnytown, and it seems like he's actually more suited for the coldness of the Winter Court. His outfit was formed by a single bolt of white fabric, not a robe, not a dress, but something in between. I'm guessing that this is SJM's way of describing a toga without actually describing a toga.
So basically, Helion is the ultimate frat bro from Animal House. Toga,
oh my
toga,
God.
toga.
A golden cuff of a serpent is around his powerful bicep, and he has glowing dark skin, onyx hair, and a crown of spikes acting as the rays of the sun. And he's brought buddies. His High Fae crew is almost as large as the Inner Circle members, all wearing similar styles, but instead of Helion's white toga, they're wearing cobalt, crimson, and amethyst, blue, red, and purple. It's almost like the color of our Bat Boys. I love that little connection between these two courts. Quote, and all of them are fit and, quote, gleaming with health.
Which, for that to be a distinctive trait as a Fae, means like you're really fit and healthy. Like, wow.
But unlike our Inner Circle, Helion here has his own mask on, which he'll later call out Rhys for making him look as bad as Baron since Rhys has finally taken his mask off. Why would Helion feel like he needs to have a mask on, though? First off, he is known to have over 1,000 libraries containing all of the knowledge in the world. Think about that. It's not 1,000 books. That's 1,000 libraries containing probably millions of books within them. That's insane. But Amarantha sadly looted some of these libraries for herself. So much like Kallias, when he was burned by Amarantha, he is very distrusting of anything associated with her / that could hurt his court again. Not unlike how Rhys was using his own mask to protect Valaris. Secondly, with Helion wearing his own mask, he's kind of an all-knowing guy. And I think that this mask helps others fear him and his wealth of knowledge just a little bit.
Another thing about Helion is that he was around during the War 500 years ago, but he did not become High Lord of the Day Court until about 40 years ago, just like Kallias and Tarquin. Like I've said, Day, Winter, and Summer rebelled against Amarantha's reign, and all three of the court's High Lords were killed. So Helion may be older and more experienced, but he is a relatively new High Lord. And I can see him coming with his high mask on as a political move to not show his hand because he's still stepping into this High Lordship role, making an impression on his peers and crafting his reputation as a ruler.
However, before we move on to our next High Lord, I have something to note about this High Lord of Day. His gold and lapis lazuli adornments remind Feyre Darling of something, or should I say someone, Papa Archeron. It turns out that Papa Archeron once bought and traded this metal and gem with an arid southeastern kingdom that was once ruled over by Fae as if they were gods. Daglin. While Feyre was more interested in the shipment of figs that came from this area of the world, she can still remember that ancient necklace that her father had in his possession. Spice and Gem Watch continues because did Papa Archeron also trade with the Day Court? And this southeastern kingdom was just some cover-up. But he traded lapis lazuli and gold with the Day Court. Spice Watch.
You know that one of these days you have to do a full episode on Spice Watch because I barely tracked what you were just saying.
Basically, Papa Archeron worked with the Day Court. He sold gems and metal with the Day Court. He sold gems with the Summer Court, and then he sold spices with Valaris in the Night Court. That's all you need to know. That's the TLDR version.
And to clarify, not Papa Archeron himself, the Papa Archeron ancestors.
Yes, because when did trade stop in Prythian? When Amarantha came into rule. When did Feyre and her family start losing their money and go into this massive debt that then Papa Archeron himself was the casualty for? It was about probably 50 years ago. Spice Watch.
Finally, there's our two late arrivals who show up more than an hour later. Because yes, Tarquin indeed does show up at this meeting. Huzzah! We'll never know if he would have come here if the Night Court didn't show up to aid in the Battle of Adriata. I like to think he would have on behalf of Prythian, but we have to remember he thought the Night Court might be on Hybern's side. Also to note, Tarquin is the youngest High Lord here. He's only 80 years old, and just like Helion and Callias, he became High Lord 40 years ago after his predecessor was killed by Amarantha for rebelling. The Summer Court had taken a lot of hits from Amarantha first and now Hybern. Adriata and the other cities were severely damaged under her reign, and the court citizens tormented and terrorized. Summer Court is also geographically at the biggest disadvantage. Its western border faces Hybern, so the enemy has direct access to their shores, as they learned with the Battle of Adriata recently. It shares a southern border with the Spring Court, which has supposedly allied with Hybern, and Hybern is now occupying its lands as it prepares for the wall to come down, and its eastern neighbor is the Autumn Court, which doesn't give two shits about them. So if anyone needs aid from the rest of Prythian, it's the Summer Court. And I believe Tarquin knows this, especially after the recent attack on Adriata. But of course, he's not going to come here and beg by any means. Not unlike Callias, he comes with a tentatively open mind. The Night Court surprised him and proved they are truly fighting for Prythian, so Tarquin is willing to at least hear them out. It's the least he can do for them after they aided him in battle. And then, of course, we have the charming Baron, who comes with his 3 sons and wife. This is the first time we really meet the High Lord of Autumn, despite feeling like he's been the topic of many conversations throughout the series. He is the oldest of the High Lords and was already in his prime during the war 500 years ago. He has a slender face and brown hair and wears a scowl. We all know how much this guy sucks. Feyre genuinely wondered if he would side with Hybern instead, despite his eldest son convincing him to attend this meeting and hear the courts out. Because yes, remember that as part of the Night Court's secret deal with Eris, he would ensure his father showed up to this meeting and do everything in his power to make the Autumn Court fight for Prythian. Baron did side with Prythian against the Loyalists last war, but he is someone who will side with whichever force has the best chance of winning. Yes, even if that does mean switching sides. And right now, that sure does seem like Hybern. So the High Lord of Autumn is begrudgingly here, thanks to Eris's manipulation, and ultimately, he's only looking out for his best interests.
Spoiler alert, Baron is about to be pretty thirsty later in this meeting after angering Feyre. But don't worry, Baron, we know the trick for all your hydration needs. It is called LMNT.
LMNT is an electrolyte solution that has enough sodium, potassium, and magnesium to get you feeling and performing your best. Plus, my favorite part is that it has 0 sugar, artificial flavors, or other dodgy ingredients to hold you back.
My favorite part of LMNT is the massive variety of their flavors. I recently started doing a exercise group class with my husband, and I'm dying inside. So you know that I am having an LMNT after every single class. It makes me feel so much better. Last night we finished our class and I had watermelon salt. It was my favorite. I love that one. It's I go back and forth between that one and mango chili just because I love those two so much. This treat is so good for me and my hydration. I literally drink LMNT every single day, especially on those days that I do that group class.
LMNT came up with a fantastic offer for us. Get your free sample pack with any LMNT purchase at drinklmnt.com/FFG. Also, be sure to try the new LMNT Sparkling. It's a bold 16-ounce can of sparkling electrolyte water to carry with you on the go. While there may be an agreed upon truce among the High Lords at this meeting, it's notable but not surprising that Rhys makes sure their crew's shields are up. Plus, he places a mental and physical shield around all of them too. You know, just in case. There is this initial test of sorts with Feyre showing up as High Lady. She isn't broadcasting her new title, but she is, of course, acting like she's got it. She doesn't bow to Thesan like the rest of her companions. She stares the other High Lords down without emotion. I find it so interesting how she insisted the Inner Circle arrive with masks off. But like we've said before on the podcast, her mask is more of innocence and sweetness, while the real public-facing Feyre leans Slytherin. And that's what we're seeing on display here. It's not a mask of coolness and restraint. That's just her in this kind of setting. It's not a dig at her at all. She is revealing that she is one of these High Lords and has to assert her dominance right from the get-go. And I think she does a graceful but firm job of it, especially because this is so against the status quo, and it certainly is a test of sorts. Anyway, we'll talk more about her role here as High Lady shortly. In this room with powerful rulers who all have their own histories and agendas, agendas, it's no surprise that there are multiple relationships on display, or notably not on display, as this meeting begins. For instance, there's tension between Tarquin, Helion, and Callias, which at first made me go, wait, their courts rebelled together against Amarantha. Shouldn't they be allies? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized Amarantha probably stirred up distrust and disdain between these new High Lords. We already know she did it between Rhys and Callias, so I bet something happened under the mountain between Helion, Tarquin, and Callias to create this cold tension that we're seeing on display here. We also have the Lady of the Autumn Court who locks eyes with Helion as he gives her a mocking incline of his head, making her quickly avert her gaze. What could that mean? Don't worry, that is today's Suriel Teatime topic. There's the Autumn Court sons, including Eris, and the obvious tensions with Mor and Azriel. We even have Varian glowering at Cassian, who just shoots him a cocky grin. He only destroyed one building, Varian. Come on now. I'm assuming his ban stays in place even when the blood rubies are receded. Like, what in the world happened with this one building wreckage? I need this as a short story.
Okay, we've got the novella. We need Cassian wrecking one building. We need raging sports fan Amren.
Yes.
So many little short stories we need. However, there are two people who do not seem to have any tension between them, and that is Mor and Vivian, Callias's mate, who in the moment of tension-filled greetings, these two squeal and run towards each other for their reunion. Not only does their friendship and their high-pitched get-together ease the tension that we feel as readers, but it also gives Rhys an opportunity to reach out and try to connect with Callias, who, cold with everyone, stares at his mate with warmth. When Vivian gives Callias a vulgar gesture, quote, Rhys looked to Callias with what I assumed was some sort of long-suffering male expression. But sadly, the High Lord of Winter does not return the gesture, instead freezing Rhys out, which does really make me feel for Rhys. He is trying to connect with others, and especially now that the mask is off, and this subtle rejection is noted. But back to Mor and Viv, because we've got some hot gossip to catch up on while we wait for the late arrivals. Turns out that Vivian and Callias were childhood besties, but he secretly loved her his whole life.
He was fiercely protective of her even before Amarantha took over and placed this sharp-minded female on border duty for decades to avoid the scheming of the court. My guess is that this was during the 50 years Amarantha was sweet-talking the courts, and maybe the previous High Lord of Winter fell for Amarantha, but Callias, who remember was not High Lord yet, didn't trust her and wanted to protect Vivian from what was inevitably to come.
So when Amarantha did take away his power and sent him under the mountain, he, much like Rhys did with the Inner Circle, flung out remnants of his power to warn her, telling her that he loved her and told her to protect their people. I love that their people right there, like how he's already linking them together. Also, side note, how the fuck did he do this? Because did he write a note and winnow it away? Is he Daemati? And we just never talk about it? Like, how did he send the message to Vivian?
I was wondering the exact same thing. Like, I even annotated, so is he Daemati? I also have to reiterate, he was not High Lord yet, but he must have been the heir apparent to be so close with the High Lord and already in quite the position of power where he was present for the party under the mountain and working with Vivian to protect their people. Or to be honest, Nicole, this might be a Cauldron boil me situation where SJM forgot that he wasn't supposed to be High Lord yet, or be able to speak mind to mind with Vivian if he's not supposed to be Daemati.
I'm going to go with he's Daemati and we just never talk about it because I need an explanation for it. Like that's, oh God, Cauldron boil me. Anyway, back to the story. For nearly 50 years, she protected the small city within the Winter Court border and offered safe harbor for anyone who was able to make it there. She held the Winter Court together during all those years, despite Amarantha's unleashing her wrath on the court regularly. Remember, the Winter Court is right next to the middle, so it makes sense that it's a pretty high casualty right there. And in all of these years, Vivian realized how much she loved Callias in return. So when he returned, he winnowed right to her. She kissed him, and then he got down on one knee and asked her to be his wife. Then, after they got married that same night, during their own bang, 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 the mating bond snapped into place. Swoon! This is the friends to lovers story that I am here for. However, after story time finishes, all of the High Lords take their seats. No Notably, not one chair is left empty, meaning it is very noted that the Spring Court did not RSVP and is not planning on joining.
Which makes total sense why they assume that. First of all, Tamlin is the only High Lord, like you said, who did not respond whatsoever. He ghosted all the correspondence. And then there's just that little tiny detail that he has allied with Hybern. So why the hell would they expect him to show up here to fight against Hybern?
However, just as the meeting is getting down to business, something or someone bursts in, making quite the entrance. An entrance that we readers and Feyre are very familiar with. Think back to chapter 4 of ACOWAR when Tamlin, or Manbear Pig, burst into her cottage. Well, it happens again. Quote, like a crack of lightning, vicious as a spring storm, he winnowed into the chamber itself, and my blood went colder than Khaleesi's ice as Tamlin appeared and smiled like a wolf.
Manbear Pig is back, everybody!
As Tamlin bursts into the meeting, one of the first things that Feyre notices is his lack of entourage, and he is the only High Lord without people at his side during this meeting, which let's think of who would have come with him to this meeting. Lucien, obviously, would be number one. Bronn and Hart, his two main sentries, probably, most definitely, I'd actually say. And what do these three people have in common? Yes, they are no longer in the Spring Court because of Feyre's evil villain era, which, don't get me wrong, I'm not feeling sorry for him in the slightest. As Feyre, who is unable to school her features into the cold indifference as her friends are, she mentions he is in one of his moods, one of his tempers here. And this temper is only part of the reason why the closest people who would be with him at the meeting left his stupid ass. He may be staring daggers and panting in anger at Feyre for all the horrible things that befell his court, but he is in a puddle of his own stupid making, and the isolation that he has is definitely part of it. He wears no crown, no adornments, and not even a sign of a bandolier. I love this symbolism for how much he has lost his power as a High Lord. Good riddance. I'm so mad at Tamlin. I'm so mad at him today.
Thiessen, ever the gracious and neutral host, breaks the silence first after Tamlin's entrance. We were not expecting you, Tamlin.
Thiessen is so calm, cool, and collected as fucking Manbear Pig just burst and into his palace in his court. What meditation app is this dude using to be this calm? Jesus.
You know it's because he wakes up early in the morning. That's the key.
You know what? I don't wake up early in the morning and I'm not a very calm person, but I'm okay with that. That's a choice I'm willing to make.
Baron follows up with the obvious. They're surprised Tamlin is here because his allegiance lies elsewhere. Sufficient to say, the High Lords are wary that Tamlin is here. They have all come to this meeting to discuss uniting against Hybern. Emphasis on discuss. The Night Court still has to win most of them over. So, of course, Tamlin's presence isn't really welcome here because it throws a major curve in their strategy talks. The High Lords are now having to ask themselves, what can they say in front of Tamlin, who is supposedly Hybern's ally? We cannot emphasize that enough here. Then later on, should they be able to trust him at his word that he's not actually with Hybern, and can they trust the documents he provides as proof that he's actually a spy? What's more, Tamlin isn't here with an open mind to ally with the Night Court like the rest. He is here to discredit the Night Court and use this open forum to rally the other courts against the Night Court. Thankfully, the other High Lords, they don't have time for his drama. And I just love that. They're here in their court's best interests. They don't care about this lover's quarrel when protecting their people is at stake, which ends up making Tamlin seem that much smaller, wrapped up in his petty grudge, and that much more alone in his own misery and twisted narrative.
Despite all these High Lords feeling quite uncomfy, Tamlin's gaze has still not left Feyre's, particularly lowering so that he sees a ring on her finger and the tattoo on her arm, marking her as Rhys's mate and wife. While this is technically not the first time he's seeing them together and seeing them as mates together, Hybern in last book was different for just a blanket statement. Here he is really seeing her as an equal for the first time, not his property that he's determined to take back. Yuck. This is also the first time he's seeing her and Rhys fully as mates. And also remember that last book, Tamlin thought that Rhys like manipulated her mind into believing that they're mates. He did not see them as actually mates, and now he's seeing it with the masks off. He also spent weeks with Feyre playing the role as his blushing bride, and he believed her ruse happily and quite naively. After she left his court in absolute ruins, he knew he was played like his own favorite fiddle, but this is him seeing how badly he was truly played. Again, I am not saying this with a single ounce of pity for this man-bear-pig. Tamlin, still not having said anything to the group, looks to the hand that Rhys is resting on Feyre's knee and is still looking in loathing at Feyre. Loathing for what state she left his court in. Loathing for choosing another man over him. And of course, loathing for, major air quotes, making him look like the number one thing he fears above all else. Less than and weak. All of which are his own fault, and I'm not going to hold back because this is just me getting started with my utter rage at Tamlin this episode. However, jumping ahead a few pages to the big reveal that Tamlin sees with Feyre being High Lady, as he is insulting Feyre, and don't worry, I'm going to go through each and every one of those insults, and we can simmer in anger together. Azriel cuts in with his ironic comeback, quote, "Be careful how you speak about my High Lady," which causes the Azriel girlies to go feral, but skirt, because Tamlin knew that Feyre was Rhys's wife and mate. But High Lady, this is news to him. Quote, "Surprise flashed in Tamlin's eyes, then vanished. Vanished, swallowed by pure fury as he realized what that tattoo coating my hand was for." Remember back in ACOWAR's early chapters, Feyre was with Tamlin and wondered what everyone would call her after she became his wife. And she wondered if she would be High Lady of Spring. And not only did Tamlin shut it down, saying that there's no such thing, but it also made Feyre very uncomfortable, just the idea of being High Lady or Lady of the Spring Court. And it wasn't really something she wanted. Tamlin is a man of tradition. And because his father ruled without a High Lady at his side, and other High Lords did for many years, the idea of going against tradition was not even a possibility on his radar. But here he is, believing that she was aspiring to be in power. And he says, quote, "It was not enough to sit at my side, was it?" A hateful smile curled his lips. "You once asked me if you'd be my High Lady. And when I said no," a low laugh, "perhaps I underestimated you. Why serve in my court when you can rule in his?" Feyre back then did not want this type of power. She was so lost in her own despair from under the mountain. Rhys made her High Lady not because of her power or her thirst to climb up the ranks, and instead, he made her High Lady because he loves her and wants her to be his equal. Tamlin saying to the group that she wanted to be his High Lady, and then she goes off and is suddenly Rhys's, it makes her seem so power hungry, disingenuous, and like a trickster. Who else do we associate all those three things with? Amarantha. Fuck you, Tamlin. Count number one.
It also completely discounts their mating bond. Tamlin is known for not having warm and fuzzy feelings about mating bonds. After all, his parents were mates, but they were wrong for each other. So he's accusing her of choosing Rhys for power versus because they are mates and meant to be together. It probably helps Tamlin sleep at night. He's convinced himself that his girl didn't leave him because she was in love with another male. She left because she was power hungry. I briefly touched on how calculated Feyre has been with her High Lady reveal since they entered the Dawn Court. She's owning her title as High Lady, but also not broadcasting it. Each High Lord has learned the news in his own way and had his own reaction, or lack thereof. Like I mentioned earlier, Thesan learned when she didn't bow to him, which led him to notice her tattoo and lift his eyebrows in surprise. We can assume Helion similarly notices the tattoo that marks her as High Lady, and he's more worried about what this means for Tamlin, asking if he knows that she is High Lady. But it's followed with a dark laugh and telling Rhys that he always liked him. His smile comes off as promising violence, but with the context of Helion wearing his mask, I read this more as, "Rhys, you sly devil." When Helion voiced it out loud for the first time while they waited for everyone to arrive, that's when Khalees and Vivian learned the news. And Vivian has the best response of all. Why can't I be High Lady? Good question. Oh, Kalias is going to hear about this later. It goes to show how radical this really is. It's not a mark on Kalias' love and respect for his wife and mate. It's just that this is unheard of, making Vivian be like, wait, we can do that? Tarquin, of course, already knows from after the battle when he chastised Feyre for speaking to a High Lord the way that she did, and Rhys defended her as being a High Lady who can do what she wants, to which Tarquin had voiced how Rhys sure likes to spit on tradition. Baron just observes that she is High Lady from her crown. He's unimpressed, and he's not deigning it with more attention than the simple acknowledgement, I'll say. So as a whole, the fact that she is uniquely crowned a High Lady is not really made into a big deal. These High Lords have bigger issues, like the fate of the world and united against Hybern. Is it a surprise because it's so untraditional? Yes. Does it ruffle their feathers that a female has the same status as them? For most of them. But besides having to treat her as an equal, it is not really consequential to these High Lords unless they were to believe Tamlin spouting about how she and Rhys are wanting to be High King and High Queen. In fact, I'm a little surprised that Tamlin's spin on how negative her High Ladyship is doesn't catch on more. It shows how little sway Tamlin has at this point.
I want to go back to Tamlin's third sentence in this meeting, because in response to Rhys saying he is not in the business of discussing plans with enemies, which, pause, it is fucking fair, because from the Night Court's point of view, it seems that Tamlin is 100% in cahoots with Hybern. Might we remember the end of ACOWAR.
And siding with Ianthe at the beginning of this book, which was a direct blow to his court and showing them that he cares more about being a strong ally to Hybern than caring about his people. And also, he did not shield against Hybern. That alone could be proof that he has nothing to hide from them and that he trusts them.
However, Tamlin throws back at Rhys, quote, "No, you're just in the business of fucking them." And so it begins. His third sentence in this meeting since barging into the room, and it is the lowest blow he can possibly throw Rhys's way, reminding everyone that he sat at Amarantha's side as her whore for 50 years.
And he's planted the seed that Feyre is the enemy of these High Lords.
Fuck you, Tamlin, count 2!
I do love this exchange between Rhys and Tamlin. Rhys is like, well, it's far less destructive than war. And Tamlin is like, but you started this war in the first place. And we get this line, quote, "Rhysand's blink was the only sign of his confusion." It's like, excuse me, what the fuck are you talking about, Tamlin?
It's one of those like, you started it. Like, you started it. What are you talking about? However, Tamlin's attention shifts to Feyre. It is time for Claw Watch. It's been a minute. His claw slips out of his knuckle and he begins to lightly drag it down the arm of his oak chair. Quote, "As he'd once dragged them down my skin, he smiled as if he knew precisely what memory it triggered." From this line right here, we know just how much Tamlin came here to play dirty. And it's this moment that always makes me want to punch him in the face so badly. It's like he's trying to remind her how he used to fuck her, and he's manipulating those thoughts to moments where he was in control. And it's just, oh God, it makes me so, fuck you, Tamlin, count 3. I'm so mad. But as he continues to dig himself a deeper hole, ignoring Feyre, he turns to Rhys, quote, "When you fuck her, have you noticed those little noises she makes right before she climaxes?" Oh, and fuck you, Tamlin, count 4. As Feyre realizes here, this is not just Tamlin fighting with his ex. This is an outright shredding of her dignity and credibility and status of being someone worthy sitting at this metaphorical table. And I'm only going to say this once, as the fuck you Tamlin count is at 4. Technically, Feyre, in ruining the Spring Court, also shredded Tamlin's credibility and status. So in his mind, I'm sure he thinks that this is just a fair one-to-one payback. However, all of her chess movements were her manipulating the circumstances and letting him react naturally how he would, versus him here verbally taking her down a peg in front of her peers. I cannot fucking with this guy. Fuck you, Tamlin, count 5. I will absolutely give Rhys a huge gold star here, because in seeing what Tamlin is doing to Feyre's reputation, he laughs at Tamlin and says, quote, "Well played, Tamlin. You're learning." He is happily taking Tamlin down too, making him, Tamlin, seem weak and inexperienced in the faces of the other High Lords. Good job, Rhys.
A quick break from Reese and Tamlin's verbal sparring to talk about kids' vitamins. As a parent, I'm always doing my best to make sure that my kids get the nutrients and vitamins they need to stay healthy and happy. But it's crazy how typical children's vitamins are basically candy in disguise, which is exactly why Hiya was created. It's a pediatrician-approved, super-powered, chewable vitamin designed for kids 2 and up. Plus, it's sent straight to your door, so we parents have one less thing to worry about.
While most children's vitamins are filled with 5 grams of sugar and can contribute to a variety of health issues, Hiya is made with 0 sugar and 0 gummy junk. Yet it tastes great and is perfect for picky eaters. Hiya fills in the most common gaps in modern children's diets to provide the full body nourishment kids need with the yummy taste they love. It's non-GMO, vegan, dairy-free, allergy-free, gelatin-free, nut-free, and everything else you can imagine.
I recently introduced Hiya vitamins to my son, who is now 3, and he loves them. We let him pick out which color he wants, and he gets so excited. So we also practice our colors with it. He does his little ask for more. And I just got to say, I feel like I'm winning as a mom when he gets his nutrients and he's excited about it. Plus, they provide stickers with the first order so you can decorate your Hiya bottle. And it's just, the little things that make vitamins extra fun,
We've worked out a special deal with Hiya for their best-selling children's vitamins. Receive 50% off your first order. To claim this deal, go to hiyahealth.com/FFG. This deal is not available on the regular website. Go to hiyahealth.com/FFG to get your kids the full body nourishment they need to grow into healthy adults.
All right, let's get back over to Tamlin and Reese, because Tamlin's all like, wait till I get going. Not only is he determined to publicly shame Feyre, he is set on getting ahead with the narrative and painting the Night Court as the bad guys, which, let's be honest, shouldn't be such a difficult thing to do based on Reese donning his bad guy mask for centuries before literally today. He starts by laying out that Reese and Feyre are peddling tales of defending Prythian and fighting for peace, but Feyre manipulated his land and made it easy for Hybern to take. She warped Ianthe's mind and shattered her bones for spite. Okay, that does all check out as true, even though Tamlin is conveniently leaving out that Ianthe is a sexual predator. Or maybe Tamlin just genuinely doesn't know still.
It would not surprise me if he doesn't know. This dude is absolutely oblivious with things happening in his own court.
Tamlin will later go on about how Reese warmed Amarantha's bed for decades. Then suddenly he worked against her when the tides were turning. And sure, Hybern might have attacked Valaris, but you know what? The damage wasn't all that bad, as if they'd been anticipating this supposed surprise attack. Tamlin is twisting the story that the Night Court is using this enemy Hybern to unite Prythian for their own gain. So these High Lords need to unite against the Night Court and Hybern. I don't think he's saying that the Night Court is working with Hybern, but that they are leveraging this threat for their own gain and manipulating the situation to make Hybern out to be even worse so that the Night Court can look like victims and then saviors. And I'm not going to lie, from Tamlin's perspective about how bad the Night Court is, he makes some valid points from his perspective.
I also think Tamlin is, I don't think he's knowingly doing this. I think it's entirely subconscious. He's making himself out to be the martyr. And by exaggerating the story, he is like, I'm the good guy. I'm the good guy. Remember back in ACOWAR when Reese said, quote, "You think I don't know how stories get written? How this story will be written? I am the Dark Lord who stole away the Bride of Spring. I am a demon and a nightmare, and I will meet a bad end. He is the Golden Prince, the hero who will get to keep you as his reward for not dying of stupidity and arrogance." Tamlin has fully bought into that version of the story, maybe minus the stupidity and arrogant part. But even when points go against that part of his story and they come up, like for instance, when Varian is like, I got word to the Night Court, that's why they showed up at the battle. It's not because they were with Hybern and they came with him. Tamlin will literally rewrite the narrative in that moment so that it matches with the story that he is so deeply embedded in himself, saying that Varian is working with them since he's next in line for the High Lord of Summer after all. Oh my God, it's ridiculous. But the attempt to turn the others against Reese works briefly, we'll say, with the Winter Court, because despite Vivian and Mor being super buddy-buddy at the beginning, they, meaning Kallias and Vivian, have not exactly decided if they want to side with the Night Court in the war. Why, do you ask? There is some bad blood with them. Back in the ACOWAR dining room. Yep, you guessed it. After the summer solstice, Lucien brings up that his contact in the Winter Court, which I do wonder if his contact is Vivian or not, tells him that, quote, the Blight, aka Amarantha, killed 24 Winter Court children. Quote, it just burned through their magic, then broke their minds apart. And no one in the Winter Court could do anything about it. And even though Callias blames Amarantha fully, he is also very angry at Rhys because, from Callias' POV, Rhys sat by Amarantha's side while she gave the order. But like many other things in life, there is way more to this story because Rhys is no longer wearing the cruel High Lord of Night mask. He is vulnerable and he shares his side. When the people of the Winter Court rebelled under the mountain against Amarantha, she was furious and wanted Callias dead as punishment.
The Day, Summer, and Winter Court Rebellion happened 40 years before, and the High Lords were all killed. I'm guessing that this is a new rebellion from Callias and his people. We know Vivian was trying to free him for decades, so I could see her being behind the second rebellion, and maybe that's also why she's a little bit more open to hearing Rhys's side of the story, because she knows that she was directly involved in this and wants to hear about how Rhys actually saved her mate when she was part of why he might have been killed in the first place.
Absolutely. However, Rhys convinced Amarantha to not outright kill a High Lord, and he did so by taking her to bed. Because of Rhys distracting her, she backed off of the idea of just outright killing Callias, and given that the rebels were all dead, Rhys figured that would be the end of it. However, unfortunately, his distraction only went so far because, feeling paranoid that Rhys was defending the Winter Court, Amarantha then kept Rhys confined to her bedroom while she sent soldiers to massacre the Winter Court children. And at least one of those soldiers that she sent was a Daemati, which she did on purpose to make Callias think it was aligned with Rhys, therefore driving a wedge between Rhys and Callias to stop them from ever potentially allying against her. Even though Rhys tried to break into all of the soldiers' minds to stop them, Amarantha's hold on his power was too strong and he was not able to do so. Rhys knew that in coming to this High Lord's meeting, it meant showing sides of him that were much deeper than just his wings. He's choosing to show a side that he has yet to show to anyone really besides Feyre. He has shared stories with his mate from under the mountain, but quite frankly, still not even everything. Remember back in ACOWAR during Rhys's nightmare, he tells Feyre, quote, there are memories from under the mountain, Feyre, that are best left unshared, even with you. But here he is opening up, and his friends and family are really hearing about these types of stories for the first time. I love the show don't tell moment of just how nervous Rhys is when Feyre is noting how his skin is clammy for the first time. And who interjects this vulnerable moment from Rhys but Tamlin? Quote, stories and words. Is there any proof? Fuck you, Tamlin. Count 6.
I swear I'm Team Night Court. But I do have to say here that Tamlin has a tiny point.
Wow! Hot take.
And hold on, let me explain myself here. We know Rhys is being honest. We as the readers know that. We know how vulnerable he is right now. And we are, of course, saying fuck you, Tamlin, because we know that he's got the wrong of it. But it could be perceived as Rhys telling the other High Lords what they want to hear, especially Callias. He knew taking off the mask was going to be difficult to convince them because he doesn't have proof, only his word. And his word has never been trustworthy in the past because of the reputation he did build for himself. I think the main reason Callias believes him is, number one, he wants to. He is a good male who has a soft side, and he came here with an open mind and to hear Rhys out. And this is him doing that, and Rhys has a reasonable explanation where he senses that honesty. And number two, what's more is that Rhys swears on his mate's life. Callias, newly mated too, recognizes how big of a deal that alone is. And I think that Rhys swearing on Feyre's life, Callias truly realizes that this is Rhys without the mask on, and he is being honest. Because you don't just say that you swear on your mate's life willy-nilly, no matter who you are or what mask you're wearing.
Well, and I'll also throw in that Vivian speaking up and saying that while she was not under the mountain, she would hear stories of how Rhys attempted to stop Amarantha's killing rampages. And Callias trusts Vivian's word more than anything as his mate. And it's such a sweet moment because after Vivian says that she believes him, for lack of a better term, Rhys is utterly speechless. Someone sees the good in him with only knowing him previously with a mask on.
Rhys is doing his best with the mask off at this High Lord meeting, and I do think it's in his best interest, like Farah had said. It would be very difficult for him to be his outwardly suave, calculated, and cruel self when needing to face Khalees about the Wintercourt children, for instance. His wings being out caused a little surprise, but it doesn't cause a scene or seem to influence the other High Lord's opinions about him. His wings are just there. They are part of who he truly is. As Helion will later say, Rhys is on his best behavior today. And yes, that is the point and what Rhys needs to do to win over these allies and show that he truly is on their side, especially with Tamlin trying to convince them otherwise. In fact, Tamlin's presence here trying to play into how bad the Night Court is and how this is all a facade kind of backfires on Tamlin. It could have gone in either direction. The other High Lords could have agreed with Tamlin that the side of Rhys is not possible and that he must be duping them.
Which Baron, to no surprise, is all for leaning into the possibility that Rhys and Feyre are terrible people. I love that he mentions not once, but twice, Claire fucking better. Never forget you, Claire, even Baron.
But instead, Rhys's mask off seems to put a few puzzle pieces together for some of these High Lords, where his true intentions actually make sense and have them believing him. Is it maybe a little far-fetched that his true self is as well received as it is with most of the High Lords? Yes, I really do think so. But for instance, Varian supports this true side of Rhys when it comes to only why the Night Court came to the Summer Court's aid in the Battle of Adriata, to which Tamlin's response makes him seem unhinged with his accusations, that Varian must be in on it too, since he's next in line for his Summer Court High Lord. I think that accusation about Varian, more than any other about the Night Court, was the real hold up, you are really delusional moment that the other High Lords saw with Tamlin.
Well, and it turns out that Tamlin did not just come to this meeting to absolutely shit on Feyre and get a fuck you count from FFG. No, he has actually come to this meeting to say that he is on their side and is wanting to work against Hybern. What? It turns out that Timmy Tam himself has been acting as a spy, gathering information on Hybern's troops movements, ammunition, caches of Faebane, and more. All things that he has gleaned over the past few months. He says to Feyre, quote, "Why do you think I invited them to the house, onto my lands? I once told you I would fight against tyranny, against that sort of evil. Do you think that you were enough to turn me from that?" Rhys will later say that he feels like they should have given Tamlin, I'll call it the benefit of the doubt. And personally, I wildly disagree because there is no part of Tamlin in this meeting that gives I'm in charge of the situation vibes. But Tamlin did help Feyre's family out in poverty. He opened up to her about never wanting to be like his father when it comes to slavery. Ahem, the exact thing that Hybern is working towards.
See, I do kind of agree with Rhys with that later statement that he makes, because Tamlin, goddammit, I'm saying it again, makes the point that it was so easy for Feyre to think him as a monster, when if she had looked at it from a political perspective, she may have wondered if he had a bigger plan or given him some kind of benefit of the doubt. By the way, I cannot stress enough that her feelings toward Tamlin are valid and his temper really could make him a monster. That is not the point of this at all. What I'm trying to convey is that we got to know a different side of Tamlin in A Court of Thorns and Roses. And that part of him didn't just disappear or go non-existent or make us think that we were crazy that it ever existed in the first place from book 1 to book 2. This is more so a reminder to us readers that there are always two sides of every story. He dug his own grave and Feyre is right in her hatred of him. And her own experiences and narrative about her ex drove some big political repercussions.
Okay, I can vibe with your reasoning behind that. Personally, I think that Rhys should have just looked into Tamlin's mind from the get-go. And honestly, I don't feel like the other High Lords would have disagreed. Like, I think they would have backed me up on this. It would save them a lot of time. It would save them a lot of drama. And yeah, Tamlin would probably be a little pissy party about it, but at least everyone would know that, oh, he's actually being genuine. Because, as we'll learn next episode, according to Jurian, Tamlin went right back to Hybern and told them everything that they discussed in this meeting. So Tamlin seems like an absolute little snickety snake. Given that Tamlin does not have all the knowledge that we readers do have after reading ACOWAR, it does make sense that he is in disbelief that she would believe him to be so evil after she witnessed Rhys and everything he did under the mountain. Although he says this in the worst fucking way possible. Quote, I'm just quoting all the Tamlin lines that make my blood boil today. Quote, yet you witnessed all he did under the mountain and still spread your legs for him. Fitting, I suppose. He whored for Amarantha for decades. Why shouldn't you be his whore in return? Fuck you, Tamlin, count 7. That is ridiculous right there. God.
Every single point that he is trying to make, he has to bring in a very vulgar, inappropriate way that his ex-fiance is now sleeping with his enemy. And that just shows how hung up Tamlin is on this. And that is really what is frustrating all of these other High Lords, where they're like, you are not trying to be productive. You are literally just squabbling about your own lover's drama here. And we don't have time for this. So yeah, understandably, the rest of the High Lords, they just don't believe Tamlin at his word that he's against Hybern, which he anticipated. So here's some proof, everybody. Apparently, Tamlin has been carefully collecting information on Hybern these months. This information will indeed become vital during the final battle when the Autumn Court uses this to burn all Hybern's caches of Faebane. But again, understandably, right now the other High Lords just aren't going to believe this information that he's brought at face value. Tamlin has lost all credibility and he needs to earn it back. And he's not doing a very good job of proving that he is trustworthy as he tries to turn everyone against the Night Court and accuses others like Helion and Varian of being the bad guys too. As Thiessen says, quote, if we need to ally against Hybern, you are doing a good job of convincing us not to band together, Tamlin. Fantastic point.
Let's say Tamlin was not working against Hybern. Let's say he was actually Hybern's little minion and he goes to this meeting as a spy for Hybern. If he went to this meeting and productively, emphasis on that word, productively turned all of the High Lords against each other, from Hybern's point of view, that would have been an amazing move for his own war efforts. Like, it's political genius. So of course everyone is like, Tamlin, you suck. Like, what are you, like, you're doing a great job of convincing us that you're actually working with Hybern. When Tamlin mentions that the Archeron sisters basically have a wing fetish after seeing Nesta and Cassian have a single interaction. That's how like prominent their
I know.
Like, not even mating bond, but like, because it's not obvious yet, but still, it's just amazing. Feyre is absolutely irate with Tamlin, and she finally throws her hands up in the air, asking him, what do you want? Do you want me to apologize? Do you want me to crawl into your bed and play nice little wife? And her feelings are so fair.
Good for her. Like,
yes.
I'm not saying this as a dig at her, but like, about time to stand up and say something to him and just like knock it off, you know? Everybody is trying to be so productive and working towards something. And Tamlin is here just like, he has
stirred the shit pot. Like, he's just stirring the shit pot. Like, she and the other High Lords came to this meeting to have a proactive conversation to get their ducks in a row to get ahead of Hybern in this war. A war that could literally save the rest of humanity. And Tamlin is sitting here being like, but you are such a bitch. And no. So Tamlin, of course, and her saying like, what do you want? What do you want, actually? He says, quote, why would I want spoiled goods returned to me? The moment you let him fuck you like and fuck you, Tamlin, count 8. But thank goodness he does not get to finish his stupid sentence, because even though his mouth opens and he attempts to snarl, he cannot make a peep, because Rhysand, Ade Madi, is like, no. This move from Rhys is huge, not only for the impact it has with finally shutting up Tamlin, but it is also a reminder to the other High Lords who are sitting here at this meeting that he, Rhys, is powerful beyond freaking measure. They are all power. Remember how it's described in ACOWAR. High Lords are power. Rhys is on another freaking level. Quote, the others, who had been watching with disdain and amusement and boredom, now turned to my mate, now possessed a shadow of fear in their eyes as they realized who and what exactly sat amongst them. And it's true. All Rhys would need to do to get them all, not just Tamlin, them all to side with him on this war, is slice into their minds and make them do his bidding. But he's a nice male and he doesn't want to do that.
The assumption here is that Rhys ripped through Tamlin's powerful mental and physical shield that he inevitably would have in place. And it is flabbergasting that a High Lord is able to break through another High Lord's shield, proving again just how much more powerful Rhys is. Because remember, Tamlin is a powerful High Lord. He is more powerful than his father was, and when he entered this meeting, the others were nervous around him because they know what he's capable of. I have to wonder if Tamlin had a shield up in the first place, because he sure didn't when Hybern came into the spring court when he was supposedly a spy against them, and Feyre had to shield his mind from the Lannister twins.
It would be such poetic justice if Tamlin truly just did not have his shield up in this meeting specifically, because he has lost fucks to give. Like, he is just on a rampage, unhinged style. So it is no surprise that to us readers, this entire scene is truly just a one-to-one comparison of these two guys. Tamlin is furious. He's snarling. He's playing dirty. And Rhys is sitting in his seat. He's calm, he's got restraint, he's choosing his words carefully, and he's bringing the conversation back to the matters at freaking hand. Have we mentioned that the state of the world is in peril right now? And before you're like, well, Nicole, put him in Tamlin's position. I will disagree and say that Rhys was in Tamlin's position, sort of. When it appeared to Rhys that Feyre was choosing Tamlin instead of Rhys, he was like, I'm just going to sit back and I want her to live her life the way that she would choose to. Now, playing my own devil's advocate, yes, Feyre did not go into the Night Court and completely ruin it. And she also did not do a lot of the things that she did to Tamlin. However, there is this element of choice, because here is Feyre in this meeting. Her choice is on full display. She has chosen the Night Court, and Tamlin is still acting like an absolute unhinged monster. So you can't help but think, wow, Rhys is really the better male.
This show of power against Tamlin, it's not just to shut him up as he goes on and on about how butthurt he is that Feyre chose Rhys instead. It is also to demonstrate to the other High Lords that he is indeed more powerful than any of them. In a way, he's on the defense after Tamlin pushed his narrative that Rhys and Feyre are power hungry, manipulative, and a bigger threat than all of them unifying together against Hybern. Quote, if you want proof that we are not scheming with Hybern, consider the fact that it would be far less time-consuming to slice into your minds and make you do my bidding. Okay, well, that is one way to convince them that you're a good guy. But in all seriousness, Rhys went the vulnerable route. Now he needs to show his hand of strength and power, remind them what he is capable of, and that because he is asking and trying to work together, he is being genuine and wanting to ally. Did he break the peace agreement by breaking through Tamlin's supposed shield and shutting him up? Yes. But you know what? Everybody wanted Tamlin to shut up. And it was doing them all a favor because Tamlin could have been more productive than he was. He has vital information about Hybern. He could have come to this meeting to gain the trust and favor to work all together here with that vital information. But instead, Tamlin is choosing not to go that route. And he has become a hindrance throughout this meeting. And everyone's just straight up sick and tired of him.
Well, let's also not forget that he knows how terrible Hybern is, because Hybern has infiltrated the Spring Court. Like, they have posted up there. He has no more control over his own court. He knows more than most of these High Lords what is at stake. And yet he is here just being an absolute shit stick during this meeting.
Because he blames Feyre for all of that,
which is
he is not
wild.
Taking any. Well, and so like that goes back to a theme with Tamlin since the beginning of our coverage, is that he does not take accountability for his own actions, and just like always, he is not considering that he might have made a bad call with that bargain in the first place. Yes, he had his reasons. Yes, he might have been trying to play spy. Yes, he's not an actual monster like everyone thinks he is, and he invited Hybern into his territory in the first place.
I need to talk about someone other than Tamlin. I need my heart rate to lower right now. There is one particular Golden Retriever High Lord that we have yet to dive into. And God, my heart rate needs to talk about Tarquin right now. Tarquin is the youngest High Lord, we can assume by at minimum a century or so versus the other High Lords. He is also a new High Lord like Khalees and Helion, who was not primed to take over as High Lord in the first place after Nostris was killed by Amarantha, whereas we assume that at least Khalees was primed to take on the High Lord position, maybe even Helion as well.
I think so as well, based on the Lady of the Autumn Court not wanting him to get in trouble with everything. Yeah.
Yes. I fully have bought into Tarquin is the best of them, and he is the most intelligent, maybe second to Helion of all the High Lords possibly put together. Since after Daemati Rhys' showing, Tarquin is like, all right, I have officially made my decision. I'm going to fight for you. Like, blood rubies, forget about it. I'm going to fight for you, Night Court.
Well, he's been quiet for the most part throughout this meeting, letting the others talk and bicker among themselves. He has his own understandable reservations against the Night Court, but he also came to this meeting because the Night Court convinced him to, that they proved themselves that they truly are willing to fight and die against Hybern. When he clears his throat to speak, Feyre braces herself. He knows better than any other High Lord here, minus Tamlin, how deceiving the Night Court is. He could easily agree with Tamlin and have his own proof about how they're exactly the bad guys Tamlin paints them out to be. But Tarquin is smarter than that. He's more observant and has already proven that he makes judgment calls for himself versus instead of relying solely on others' influence. He confirms that the Night Court were the only ones who helped in Adriata and they wanted nothing in return. When he asks Rhys why, Rhys again answers with no mask. Isn't that what friends do? And I can almost see him shrugging, come on now, buddy. It's a callback to the friendship that could have been, the friendship that both these High Lords wanted and saw in each other before, Rhys and Feyre stole the Book of Breathings out from under Tarquin's nose. But Tarquin recognizes their true goal, the bigger picture. And again, the fact that the Night Court raced to his aid without a second thought shows their true intentions. Quote, I rescind the blood rubies. Let there be no debts between us. Huzzah! This metaphorical shake of hands to let bygones be bygones has a huge impact on the direction of this meeting. Tamlin came in swinging, so Tamlin's behavior has egged Beren on to share his own unwillingness to move forward with Rhys and Feyre. Kallias didn't fall for it, but it's Tarquin who actively says in so many words, I believe you and I stand with you. When Tarquin chooses to be the bigger male, Rhys decides to as well. But with Tamlin, he turns to Tamlin and says that he believes him and that he wants to fight for Prythian. Kallias and Helion aren't so convinced, though. I don't blame you guys. I think Rhys is quick to believe Tamlin because, for one, he is trying to be the bigger male, and not even trying, he is the bigger male and knows he has to lead by example. Rhys is also very self-sacrificing. He will set aside his own grievances with Tamlin to save Prythian, no matter how much it breaks him on the inside. Because if he can tentatively trust Tamlin, so can the others in time. Except for Beren, who is I share a border with this guy. I'm not ready to just believe him when the fallout will directly affect my court.
That's the sound of another sale on your online Shopify store. But did you know Shopify powers selling in-person products too? That's right. Shopify is the sound of selling everywhere from online, in stores, on social media, and beyond.
Shopify POS is your command center for your retail store. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify has everything you need to sell in person or online. With Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. How amazing! Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock.
If you go to the Fantasy Fangirls merchandise store, you'll see a very new store. And yes, that's right. It is with Shopify. With Shopify.
And it's really great with integrations. Let me just say that.
It looks so beautiful. We're obsessed with it. We love it so much. With Shopify POS, you can accept all major credit cards, mobile payments, and other major payment methods, all with low fees and transparent pricing starting on day one. Take customers from picking it out to picking it up. Shopify syncs in-store inventory with Google, so when local customers search for that thing they want that you have, bam, you are there. Demand meet supply.
Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/FFG, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/FFG to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/FFG.
With Beren and his sons grabbing the microphone, of course, the drama continues. Eris and Beren ask about Lucien and about that, quote, other sister, aka Lucian's mate, being quite the beauty.
Pause, because how do they know about this?
Through the wind whispered into their ear, just like it does the Bone Carver and Lanthus and Bryaxis. Oh my!
I do also think that it could easily just spread through the rumor mill. Ianthe, she could have easily started whispering and making sure that rumor spread like wildfire. That's actually probably my headcanon. She made sure Autumn Court found out about Lucian's mate to have something over him.
Fucking Ianthe. Just when I needed something to hate her more. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. I love hating Ianthe. So more quotations, absolutely playing into the act that they're supposed to hate each other, casts a dig at Eris about him loving to hear himself talk even after 500 years. So Eris claps back with a, quote, "Good to know that after 500 years, you still dress like a slut." Ooh.
Oh dear. So
Oh, dear.
before we get into the doozy of what happens next, we need to ask ourselves why Eris would act this way when they are secretly allies. And that's the answer right there. They're secretly allies. Their alliance includes Eris overthrowing his father and the Night Court supporting him becoming High Lord of Autumn. If Eris shows a hint of camaraderie, that's a huge red flag. We also know that Baron tortures his son as punishment when he does something displeasing. So Eris may be acting in line to avoid an unnecessary punishment. Remember, pretty much everyone except the Inner Circle has their masks on and are playing the political game. And Eris is absolutely one of those people who is doing that right now. He offers little glimpses of being a good male deep down, like when he snapped at his brothers to stop sneering at everyone upon their entrance, and protecting his mother on multiple occasions, and later volunteering to take the Faebane in outright defiance of his father. And he even apologizes to Moore, too. But as far as everyone here is concerned, Moore embarrassed him and spat on their betrothal all those centuries ago when she slept with a bastard nobody and became soiled goods. I hate even saying that, but that is their context. The Autumn Court heir is not supposed to let that slide. He needs to outwardly show what she did is unforgivable, and he will always hold that grudge over her, at least as long as his father is alive and Eris keeps playing his political games.
Speaking of people who will not let that slide and who have a grudge, let's talk about the moment that comes after, because Azriel blasts through Eris's shield with his siphon power and tackles Eris to the ground, wrapping his hands around Eris's throat. Yikes! I have to really just point out quickly how impressed I am with Azriel right now. Eris is assumed to be the next High Lord of Autumn, meaning he's got lots and lots of power. And I would assume, given the situation they're in, he's got a very powerful shield up, unless you're Tamlin. That shield and power, Azriel just barrels straight through it. There's supposed to be magic in place that makes brawling basically impossible to do during this meeting. But Feyre wonders if there's some extra special shadow power that Azriel has, or that he's using, or he's using some kind of like shadowy workaround to work around this spell. Anyway, why would Azriel, who is the calmest of all of them, let's be real, explode like this in this very tense meeting? Number one, this is 500 years of pent-up anger. Azriel is the one who found Moore in the Autumn Court with the note nailed to her abdomen. He almost went to go and kill Eris right then and there. However, he didn't, and that bloodlust has not left him even many, many years later. Reason number two. After the meeting in the Court of Nightmares where Eris came in as their ally, like surprise, Moore was absolutely heartbroken that Azriel knew about this alliance and didn't say anything to her. And while he never showed it necessarily, he felt extremely guilty for the pain that he caused Moore after that meeting. As Feyre notes, beneath Azriel's anger, she can almost see the images that have haunted him since that day. Moore ripping her hand away from Azriel, her crying, her screaming at Rhys. So this is Azriel proving to her that he is on her side, even after she felt betrayed at the Court of Nightmares. And last but not least, the obvious elephant in the room. He's been in love with her for 500 years and some asshole just called her a slut. Like, he's defending his girl in his mind.
I have some feelings about this explosion.
Oh dear.
Does it make sense from Azriel's perspective for all the reasons you just laid out? Absolutely. 100%. Did the Night Court specifically go into this meeting with the strategy to win over allies? Also, yes. So maybe attacking the heir to the Autumn Court, especially when his father is not really wanting to be on their side in the first place, maybe that wasn't such a good idea. It hurts the Night Court's image they are desperately trying to fix in real time. Rhys has centuries of a bad reputation to change during this meeting, and he was doing pretty well, all things considered, until Azriel, of all people, loses his shit. Tamlin threw insults at Feyre that were far worse than dressing like a slut. And the most Azriel did was warn him not to speak to his high lady like that. But then, of course, when it comes to Mor and Eris, he literally can't stop himself. Would this High Lords meeting be a little boring if there wasn't at least one big fight? Sure. So I'm not faulting the storytelling, but as far as what our characters are trying to achieve, this is like oh dear.
Are you giving him an L?
I am simply giving him a look of disapproval.
Well, look of disapproval aside, this shadow brawl absolutely scared the shit out of Mor. This is the embodiment of all the things that Azriel feels for her on full display very publicly. And it terrifies her just because of how much he truly loves her, and because she knows she will never be able to give him that kind of love in return. And she doesn't want to hurt him by telling him a woman that he's loved for 500 years cannot love him back. So she does the next best thing, which is sleep with Helion later, but boy, oh boy, we'll get into that in a moment.
Rhys repeatedly tells Azriel enough, but Azriel is in such a fury that he is incapable of stopping. Feyre notes that Rhys is enjoying this and could stop it if he really wanted to, but instead Rhys turns to Feyre to let her end this fight. He's inviting her to take action to show her command and the loyalty she has earned among those in her court. So Feyre says, "Come, Azriel." And he immediately stops. He takes her hand and he goes to sit at the chair next to hers. She pours him wine and she says, "Oh, he's family." And I'm so sorry, but I have some feelings about this part too. The message that Feyre and Rhys wanted to convey is there, but I struggle with the execution of this exchange. I can't help but feel like Azriel is kind of being treated like a dog.
100%.
Even by the way that Feyre says, "Come." I personally think it would have been a little more impactful if she reiterated Rhys's command enough and he halted at her exact same command first when Rhys said it. But I don't know, this part about Feyre being the one to stop him, it falls a little bit flat for me. Azriel's character deserves better than how this plays out. And this is a bad look for the Night Court all around. At least we have Helion for some comic relief, because hey-oh, his entourage owes him 10 marks for the first fight started. Helion isn't just here for the humor. He's ready to get down to business with that important Hybern information that Tamlin provided. Remember that, everybody? Let's stay on track and unite against Hybern here, people! As Helion reviews the info, his first recommendation is to destroy Hybern's caches of Faebane. Remember that Faebane is made up of ground blue stone that Hybern has mined, which when in direct contact nullifies a Fae's powers. If these Fae are going to stand a chance against Hybern, they have to eliminate the greatest threat to their strength. It's risky to destroy these caches, but worth it to ultimately keep their powers and ability to fight at full strength against the enemy. Tarquin and crew are happy to volunteer as tribute for this mission. But what's this? Thiessen has a surprise up his sleeve. Enter Nuon, a master tinkerer in the Dawn Court who has successfully produced an antidote to Faebane.
After getting samples of Faebane from Lucian after the Valaris attack, now quick aside, remember Lucian got his eye fixture from Nuon, who has a mechanical arm herself of very similar making. This is after Amarantha carved his eye out, which, quick pause, this does make me wonder what kind of magic Nuon's gold arm has, because, you know, Lucian's gold eye has some kind of magic that maybe we'll figure out someday. And to be honest, I don't think we'll ever learn about Nuon's arm, which makes me sad. So being friends and all, Lucian went out to get some samples and sent them back to her. Nuon shares that because the mother has provided them with everything they need on this earth, it was only a matter of finding what counteracts the Faebane material, which is so cool, and she found it, creating a powder for everyone to ingest that will grant them immunity against Faebane. Go Nuon! Freaking awesome! However, there's a slight catch. As Tarquin asks about the physical objects made from Faebane, for example, the chains that Rhys was in last book that rendered him powerless, or the gauntlets that they can smash through shields like they did in Valaris, unfortunately, you're shit out of luck on that one, Tarquin. This powder will only counteract the Faebane that is in your system. So if Faebane is like blown into your face like Feyre and Nesta had, or if you're pierced with a blade tipped in Faebane, you will be good to go. But that's about it.
So while you'll still be wounded in the first place if a Faebane-tipped weapon hits you, you will at least still have your quick healing ability, so the Faebane double punch of the weapon will be void.
Still a huge win for our girl Nuon.
Thiessen already has workers in 3 of his cities manufacturing as much of this antidote as possible to distribute to their unified armies, which, real quick, that right there is proof that Thiessen wasn't just open to allying with the Night Court, but he's definitely been planning to fight against Hybern even before this meeting. And while some of the High Lords, like Rhys, are excited about this discovery, others are not. Like Baron. Shock of shocks. This old nasty bigot doesn't trust Nuon to ingest this mysterious antidote. He wants to know exactly who she is. In other words, what are her motives? Because you see, Nuon's family is from Xi'an, which is a territory on the continent that sided with the Loyalists last war. So, according to Baron, she could secretly be working for Hybern and tricking all of them to make them helpless against the enemy. Because after all, her family is originally from this Loyalist territory. While I am absolutely not condoning Baron's prejudice, I do want to point out that he is old and vividly remembers the last war and who he fought against, who the enemy was. When you are basically immortal like these Fae, and you're one of the older Fae who are centuries, possibly even 1,000 years old, there is a lot more baggage and grudges that you hold on to. But more than anything, he's just an asshole and he always has been. Thiessen points out that he better be careful with his accusations because the High Lord of Dawn's mother is also from this territory. And in fact, quite a few people from the Dawn Court hail from Xi'an. We don't know for sure, but if that many fairies from this area moved for a better life around the time of the war, perhaps Xi'an is in the southern part of the continent, where they had to give up a lot of their land to the mortals after the treaty, and some of its people, including Thiessen's mother and Nuon's parents, wanted to start fresh in a safer fairy realm.
Or they also could have massively disagreed with the Loyalist movement, and they instead moved to Prythian instead.
Yep, that's another point there too, yes.
However, one member of the Autumn Court actually has their head on straight, and that is Eris. Who thought I would ever say that sentence? Eris, defying his father for only the second time in his entire immortal life, says that he will take the powder from Nuon. This is a major moment for Eris and his character in the fandom, because we all start to wonder, are you really that bad, Eris? And don't worry, we will continue to wonder that on this podcast. But Feyre really begins to think on it now. Quote, Eris might have grown to be a good male if he had had a different father. And Feyre really begins to think on that now. She goes on to internally question what life was like for him under the mountain, what kind of masks he wore, what kind of games he played. Us too, Feyre, us too.
I also love how fitting it is that she is the first to say that she will take the antidote. And then Eris volunteers to take it after Feyre does, because he saw what the Faebane effects did to her and Lucian's power fighting against him and his brothers. I also think he's stepping up in this moment to prove to the other High Lords that he is cooperative and reasonable. AKA, he'll be a good High Lord to replace his father and gain the support of the other High Lords through being a better team player than his terrible father. There also might be an element of saving face after the Azrael attack, to peek through the mask and show the others that he is not as bad as he made himself out to be with those comments toward Moore. We're going to fast forward through some more bickering, more Tamlin insults, more Helion trying to be productive, and more Baron being a selfish dick. Bottom line, the Spring Court has to evacuate. Tamlin has already been having his people move east, where Hybern hasn't marched yet, but they need to get them out of the court, period, for their safety. Baron, to nobody's surprise, refuses to accept Tamlin's people, says they don't have the resources for such a thing. You sit on a throne of lies! But Tarquin, sweet Tarquin, agrees to take in the Spring Court people. He says that despite Tamlin's involvement with Hybern, his people are innocent and deserve that protection. There's the golden retriever High Lord we love so much. Baron, who is just getting increasingly more pissed off in this meeting, points out that the seasonal courts are going to take on the brunt of this war. Rhys agrees because yes, Hybern's main goal is to be near the wall and the human lands, so naturally Hybern is focusing on the southern territories. Sorry, Baron, that's just the way that things are. Tensions rise again, and Baron goes into full attack mode. The rest of them can waste their soldiers on the humans because he sure as shit isn't going to waste his forces on them. Feyre says that he's a coward. Well, guess what? He thinks that she is too, because once again, Baron brings up poor Claire Better and how Feyre sacrificed her and her whole family instead of giving her own name. And when he toys with them, saying that he hasn't decided if he'll side with Prythian, Feyre tells him to get out if he refuses to be helpful. Oh boy, and that's when Baron really goes in for the kill. Did Feyre know that while her mate warmed Amarantha's bed, most of the court's people were locked beneath the mountain and that they were fighting to keep their families from being the nightly entertainment? Baron certainly has not forgotten or forgiven Rhys's role under the mountain, and he refuses to go along with Rhys now wanting to play the hero. Because after all, if they lose to Hybern, Rhys will probably get on his knees for him. Oh dear, sounds like Baron needs to read chapter 54.
There are so many consequences to Rhys's mask being off after many years of him playing this role of the evil High Lord of Night. And one of the biggest consequences is previously when Baron, or really anyone, would hurl insults towards Rhys. They were insults for the masked version of himself. It wasn't real. It was the version that he wanted them to see. So it was easier to brush away. But now that everyone is seeing the real him, through that, they can, and some do, hurl insults that cut right to the vulnerable throat. Ugh.
On behalf of her mate, Feyre is seeing red with Baron's rather descriptive insults, and in her rage, fire explodes from her, white-hot flames blasting into Baron like a lance. He might shield fast enough, but she sends a wave of water to encircle him and create a bubble without air. Flame pounds against it, turning the water into steam. She is happy to kill him right here, right now. As he fights with his flames in the trapped bubble, she sends a white light through the shield because, hey, it's a ward cleaver, which I thought that the white light doesn't do that because Lucian has a friend in the Dawn Court who could do that, but then we've been theorizing that it might even be Starlight. Anyway,
I do love that Feyre is just going through like a mental checklist of all the powers, like fire, check, water, check, day, check, etc., check. Like all the High Lords are just like, but I'm next. Like, that's mine.
And I love how she doesn't do the ice. And Kalias even follows up with, so did you learn the ice too?
Yeah.
Fuming with rage and very much trying to kill Baron right now, Rhys gently tells her that she has proven her point and killing Baron and Eris and the other Autumn Court brothers will only complicate matters. So let's not do that. So before we get into the High Lord's reaction to this gigantic reveal that Feyre has their powers, let's unpack what the hell she was thinking here. She wasn't thinking. That's the point. Just like Azriel. Well, okay, so remember last episode when she told Rhys that she did not want to reveal that she has the High Lord's powers? She felt like it would be a distraction from their greater mission to unify the courts and ally against Hybern. At the beginning of ACOWAR, Tamlin emphasized that these High Lords will hunt her down and kill her for stealing, air quotes there, their powers when they turned her Fae. Rhys even ensured this secret stayed hush-hush by infiltrating the Autumn Court brothers' minds to make them forget what they saw during their fight against her. And then he made a deal with Eris so that he would also protect the secret, much to Mor's dismay. Strategy number 1 going into this High Lord meeting was to get the courts on their side. Strategy number 2 was to not reveal the secret. And Feyre herself just revealed it in her fury. We can understand why she did it. I would be seeing red too after what Baron said about Rhys and Amarantha. But this is now 2 Night Court attacks against the Autumn Court in this meeting when it was supposed to be peaceful. Technically, you could say it's 3 attacks if you want to count Rhys shutting Tamlin up, but I don't think anybody's going to count that.
I count that. I mean, Tamlin deserved it, but I still count it as an attack.
I get that no one likes Autumn and they deserved it, as did Tamlin. But this is not really a good start. Yet because our story really does have to move along, the other courts don't really care and just go along with it. I love this High Lords meeting scene. I love the drama and I love the politics and the world building that it includes. But Feyre and Azriel, pull yourselves together. You're better than this, especially you, Azriel, who is 500 years older than her. But also, Feyre, you burned the Lady of the Autumn Court in this outrage, and that's not cool. You're also a High Lady who openly hates Tamlin, in part because of his inability to control his temper. You are being a bit of a hypocrite right now and not leading by example.
To be fair, Tamlin said that he loved her and then he exploded the study twice. Feyre openly hates Baron and then just exploded on him.
That is a good point. I'm simply laying out the facts.
Yes. All the High Lords have a, wait a minute, who are you moment with Feyre showing her powers. And like Lexi said, she and Rhys decided not to show or mention her powers in fear that the other High Lords would react badly, feeling like she stole some part of them and their alliance would totally fall apart. So let's go into these reactions, shall we? Baron is exactly as we expected, seething that the power belongs to them and not her, calling Feyre human filth, saying that she is not deserving of his powers. Fuck you, Baron, you suck. Tarquin's like, that's how you got through my wards. It's almost like he's putting the last piece of a puzzle he was trying to figure out together. It's the opposite of how Baron reacted. Tarquin says, quote, "You saved us under the mountain. Losing a kernel of power seems a worthy payment." This is the correct response. This is why you're the GOAT, High Lord. Thank you so much, Tarquin. Then we have Thiessen, who is like, can we get back to politics, please? He says, quote, "What's done is done. Short of killing her," Rhys's power roiled through the room at the words, "there is nothing we can do." Thiessen is so over everyone's drama. It's amazing. Super smart Helion wondered where it went that little bit, smirking at Rhys, saying, "No wonder you made her High Lady." Thank you, Helion. She deserves it because her powers are amazing and she's a badass, but whatever, it's fine.
I love how Helion describes it like a fish missing a scale. Anyone else think of the Rainbow Fish children's book reading that?
Absolutely. That's exactly what I thought of. And I'm 30. Like, that's exactly
I thought maybe you were being sarcastic there for a second. But it's like, no, really?
Oh, no, that's like actually what I thought of. Because Mom used to read that book to us. I loved that book. However, Helion does note that it seems like she took a little bit more than just a little speck of their powers. So he does a quick test. His power brushes against her own shield, quote, "as if I were some parasite leeching power from him, and he'll gladly sever it." Not as cool, Helion, but still better than Baron. And I'll even throw in Thiessen because he was like, we could kill her.
So I read this as curiosity from Helion, not meaning to be invasive, but as an intellect, he is genuinely intrigued by this discovery. And that this is really showing how our limited narrative that we have from Feyre shows that she has fallen for his mask and that he's cold and evil. And that's why she has these very kind of violent descriptions. But really, he's just curious. And we're just getting her perspective on how he's reacting.
That's a great point. I agree with you on that. Yes.
Can we also appreciate how Helion turns to Tamlin and is like, "You knew?" Shifting the blame from solely on Feyre and Rhys to Tamlin because, yes, he was the one who knew about her powers first and he didn't tell anyone, including when he came to Helion asking for help to break the bargain back at the beginning of ACOWAR. Helion right now is like, "Dude, we talked about her a lot after Under the Mountain. I was trying to help you and you kept this major bit of info secret." Like, of course, it's Helion who turns to Tamlin and is like, "Excuse me."
But it also just shows how intelligent Helion is because he's already going back through the timeline and being like, where would this have matched up? And then he was like, oh, Tamlin, wait, you would have known. Let's talk about Kallias, though, because he asks if she mastered the ice because she didn't show it at all. And he's like, you missed one. And to be honest, when he asks, you don't really know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. If she did master it, it makes her more powerful of an ally. But also if she mastered it, it makes her a rival for his own powers as well. So even as Vivian asks if it makes any difference, Cal, he's still unsure.
I really like Kallias. He is able to admit that he isn't sure how to feel about this as he processes this information in real time. And he owns that. And I just really like him.
I'll say I'm indifferent to Kallias. I'm really glad he has someone like Vivian to hand him his ass. Like that.
Oh, absolutely. Really that's one of the reasons that make him so approachable too. Yeah.
But we would be remiss if we did not talk about Tamlin in the scene, who knew about Feyre having these powers. However, he has never seen these powers in action. Like, yes, you could argue he saw it in Hybern, but that was very different. That was her exploding and making it look like this huge, like, different thing. Like, that was not him being like, oh, she's using her powers. That was very different. This is her using her powers. And this is the moment that he was so worried about, like Lexi mentioned. The other High Lords knowing about her powers and wanting to tear her open as a result. Ahem, egg on your face, Tammy. But also he never knew the strength of her power because he never let her train or use it. So as Tamlin is staring at Rhys saying to Feyre, like, you made your point, I love you, I think that Tamlin is also realizing, first and foremost, just how deep their bond goes. But I also think he's realizing that Rhys supported her in training. Unfortunately, I do not think that is him regretting the choice he made to not let her train. However, these High Lords' reaction at the end of the day are kind of moot because, as Feyre notes, she did not take their power. One more time for the people in the back. They gave their power to her along with her long life. She says, quote, "I am grateful for both, but they are mine now, and I will do with them what I will." Go Feyre! She is finally owning that these are her powers. They are not stolen as if it's something to hide or, the narrative that Tamlin put into her brain. She is owning the fact that they are hers, something new, but entirely hers. And the beautiful, sweet irony that this is right in front of Tamlin. Fuck you, Tamlin. Count 9.
Tensions are high, to say the least, at the High Lords meeting. And honestly, I think it may be time for a dinner break for everyone. And you know what? If it's dinner time, that means it's time for HelloFresh in my household. My family truly loves this meal delivery service, like so much.
From the planning, shopping, prepping, to actually getting everyone to enjoy what you made, family dinners can be very stressful. HelloFresh gets it. They make it easy by delivering fresh ingredients and picky eater approved recipes right to your door each and every week. HelloFresh's new Build-A-Plate meals are designed to let every member of your family household create their perfect plate. No more making multiple dinners to satisfy everyone, just one meal with many ways to enjoy.
I really can't express how much HelloFresh has helped my mindset around dinner. Because as a busy mom, I used to get really overwhelmed with meal planning and looking up recipes and the whole works. HelloFresh has helped our family enjoy dinner time so much more. I don't have to worry about anything. It's actually fun to pick out our meals every week and then they just arrive at our door. And I actually love cooking, just not everything else that is associated with it. It's so easy and relaxing to make dinner now. Plus, the recipes make it easy for Jake to jump in and make dinner too. This is a literal game changer for us, and I could honestly spend this whole episode writing a love letter to HelloFresh.
I mean, some of my favorite recipes are HelloFresh recipes. Like,
oh, absolutely.
Full stop. We are HelloFresh fans. And for a limited time, kids eat free. Go to HelloFresh.com/free FFG to unlock this exclusive offer. One free kids meal per box for 2 months while subscriptions are active. That's free kids meals just by going to HelloFresh.com/free FFG. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit.
Baron, more pissed than ever after Feyre's attack on him and learning that she has his powers, dismisses the meeting. But sir, you do not have that authority, because now it's Nesta's turn to put him in his place. She says that this meeting is not over as she rises from her chair. I can only imagine she has been rehearsing her speech this whole time. You know how you do as you wait for your turn to present? And when her opportunity is about to get taken from her, she's like, oh, hell no. I had to muster up way too much vulnerability to be dismissed like this.
At the beginning of the meeting, the High Lords, who were on time, were looking at Nesta, wondering how the heck she came to be what she is. And while a lot has happened since that beginning of the meeting, Nesta's standing, declaring that this meeting is not over, it drives all of their attention back to her and the mystery that those mere pointy ears' existence poses.
She gives a beautiful speech about how these High Lords are all that there is between Hybern and the end of everything that is good and decent. She puts the responsibility on these almighty High Fae rulers to protect the innocent, to stand up for them and ensure that they are not forgotten.
She doesn't only tell her story. I mean, she tells like really a shortened version of it. She also shares, quote, "I went into the Cauldron. It showed me his heart. He will bring down the wall and butcher those on either side of it." This right here is her saying, you fuckers, I have insight that you do not because I have had this experience. So don't you dare leave, Baron. Sit down.
Thiessen, ever the diplomat, brings up a counterpoint to Nesta's declaration that they have to protect the humans. The treaty made it clear that the Fae leave the humans alone because they want to be left alone. And yes, that is true. We all know the prejudices that the humans feel toward the Fae. But Nesta pushes back that this isn't about the past, but the future. Any future for all of them. She argues that this isn't about Fae or humans, but all people, especially children, to be able to grow up in a world that is safe and free. Without the High Lord's help, Hybern will destroy that world, and that possibly for any people, whether they be Fae or humans.
It's so funny. We talk so often on this podcast about Cassian's emotional intelligence. Thiessen is on the opposite end of that scale. Like, I love Thiessen. He is so data driven. He's very intelligent. He's very like, what are the matters at hand? And he does not make any emotional decisions. It is like so on the opposite, and it just makes me giggle.
Out of the Autumn Court, only Eris and the Lady of Autumn seem to be impressed by Nesta's impassioned speech. Baron, on the other hand, simply says, I shall consider it, and then vanishes with his family. Look, I get that Nesta just put herself out there and Baron kind of dismissed her and left anyway, but when he went to leave before her speech, he literally said, I hope Hybern butchers you all. And after her speech, he changed his tune to, I'll think about it. That's a huge win! I'm honestly surprised Baron didn't spit at Nesta and tell them all to F off. He is an old bigoted fart, if we haven't mentioned that yet, who isn't going to suddenly change his mind about helping the humans after Nesta speaks from the heart. And we have to remember he fought for the humans last war, when his neighbor, the Spring Court, fought for the Loyalists. So it wasn't even like he would have been the only court fighting against the rest of Prythian. Last war, he played games and it cost him dearly. His people still remember those losses, and he knows he has to do better this time to keep his high lordship seat. And if all of Prythian is going to side with saving the decency of the world and helping the humans and their own people, then yeah, he needs to at least consider being on their side. He's calculating and cruel, not stupid though. So he is actually checking his own feelings right now and not promising anything before he departs. Versus a few minutes ago when it could be conveyed that he wanted nothing to do with either side and they could all just go kill each other.
The sad thing is that Nesta really does not view this as a victory, and she faced her fears, embraced vulnerability, and let her walls down, really not for the first time that we're seeing, but first time in a group setting that we're seeing, believing it would be enough to sway them. And unfortunately, unanimously, that is not the case. We know from Silver Flames that Nesta is someone who does not like to fail and will do anything to actively avoid looking like a fool. And while I do not believe that happened here at all, it is what she views happened here. And that just, and my heart goes out to Nesta. We love you, Nesta. But after Nesta sits, it's Feyre's turn to stand and make her speech. She says, quote, I will use these powers, my powers, to smash Hybern to bits. I will burn them and drown them and freeze them. I will use these powers to heal the injured, to shatter through Hybern's wards. Again, here's her just checklist. She's like, make sure I hit all the powers. I have done so already, and I will do so again. And if you think that my possession of a kernel of your magic is your biggest problem, then your priorities are severely out of order. Whew! This is it. This is the you're being selfish idiots slap in the face that, quite frankly, a lot of them need. Pull yourself together. But it's not High Lords who stand first saying, I will fight for you. No, it is Vivian and Cressida agreeing to fight with Feyre. It has been a long time since we've discussed SJM stories and how it's always women in seats of power or positions of power, and the men are at their sides, lifting them up even higher. This is such a beautiful representation of that. So one by one, the High Lords stand, yes, even Tamlin, and they decide to unite against Hybern.
We can gather that some of them already knew they were going to agree to this alliance before the meeting, like Thiessen, who had already had his skilled workers producing large quantities of the Fae-bane antidote, and Helion, who is friends with the Night Court and already has his forces moving. But then we have a few High Lords who were swayed to ally with the Night Court at this meeting, including Tarquin, who receded the blood rubies and offered to take in the Spring Court evacuees, and Kallias, who came here willing to hear Rhys out and now believes him that he didn't contribute to the Winter Court children's deaths. And of course, there's Tamlin, who technically has been against Hybern all along and playing spy, but he doesn't want anything to do with the Night Court. I'm guessing he realizes that his attempts at persuasion against the Night Court aren't going to work and that the Night Court is just too powerful. So fine, he'll fall into line if that means fighting against Hybern with the Night Court.
But do not think that this alliance is all hunky-dory, though.
Tamlin may be allowed to stick around, but no one is willing to share details about their forces, their weapons, or weaknesses with him so close to Hybern, which, fair, I wouldn't want to say anything about my weaknesses, weapons, or forces either in his presence. If only there was someone to be able to use her powers of truth to ensure everyone's good intentions. And in good faith, they'd have to agree to this lie detector. But hey.
Or a Daimati who can infiltrate people's minds and hear what their actual thoughts are.
But the whole point is that they don't want to do that because then that would make them the bad guys and they're trying to play nice. But I'm just saying that Moore has literally the power of truth that she used on Lucian to ensure he has good intentions. But I guess everything can't be resolved with magic because where's the fun in that?
I think that's pretty fun. After arguing for a good 2 hours, it is time to break for the day. And Thiessen offers everyone to stay here at his palace, which Rhys immediately agrees to, telling Feyre down the bond that he wants to talk to some of the others alone. As we will see with Helion and Cassian's conversation later about Helion's forces and yada, yada, yada. These are the types of conversations that they, quite frankly, cannot have in front of Tamlin. So they are led to a private suite of lavish sitting rooms and, yes, you guessed it, a private dining room. In the suite, there are ornate gold cages filled with birds, which Rhys immediately puts a shield around since they can report back to Thiessen. But there's a knock on the door.
And Helion has arrived. But this is a very different Helion than we met during the High Lord's meeting. That version of the Day Court High Lord was icy cold, calculated, and dangerous. This Helion is lighthearted, warm, funny, and considerate. Turns out he was wearing his own High Lord mask during the meeting. As Rhys points out, he's really mastered the swaggering prick performance. Helion apologizes for his earlier attitude to Feyre, saying that the bastard act was part of old habits, which I interpret as so many of these males have had their masks on for centuries that it's jarring to simply be themselves and cut the games. Helion fully expected Rhys to be his usual Court of Nightmares ruler, but little did he know, Feyre Darling adjusted the Night Court strategy. In a show-don't-tell manner, we learn that there is quite the friendly history between the Inner Circle and Helion. They clearly know each other and their habits, motives, and behaviors very well, which leads them to have this natural ease with one another that we certainly haven't seen the Inner Circle experience with anyone outside of Valaris. I simply love that the Day and Night Court are so close because of course they are. They are each other's parallels.
There's one other thing that very much stands out about this version of Helion. Homeboy can fuck! And for centuries, he has been chasing after Cassian, Moore, and Azriel, all of them in bed for 4 centuries.
Which, pause, I consider that a timestamp for when he and the Lady of Autumn ended their affair, which means Lucian is 400 years old. We've been wondering that this whole podcast.
Well, look at that. There you go. I love how he's like, well, I can't have the number one love of my life, so I'll just go have a threesome with these fuckers and call it a day. Like, I'm so happy for him. Hopefully he'll get it. Maybe he'll get it someday. Not with Cassian, though, anymore. Anyway, I just want to point out how much I love that 2 High Lords are members of the LGBTQ plus community. It makes me so happy, especially given that this series unfortunately does not have as much representation as other fantasy series, or at least romantasy series in this generation. So seeing that 2 super powerful beings in this world are part of that community, and more, I'll include her there as well, I think that representation is very needed in this book. But I think his sex god attitude and just Helion with his mask off in general also plays another role for us as readers. Tension easer. We just went through several chapters of highly intense, high drama. We needed some lighthearted reprieve, basically. Helion achieves that and so much more. Quick side note, SJM in ACOWAR, Frost and Starlight, and Silver Flames hints at a threesome in every single one of those books. I think she so desperately wants to write a threesome, and who knows, maybe we'll get one in Azriel's book. We'll see. But unfortunately, there is not one in this book. Instead, Moore and Helion have a stare-off and, quote, a keen sort of awareness seemed to overtake her, like every nerve in her body shook awake. I am guessing that this is the moment she decided to sleep with Helion so that Azriel would, down, boy, down.
See, he's still being treated like a dog.
I know, I did that on purpose. I'm sorry for the Azriel girlies out there. I do not think he's an actual dog.
Well, let's shift the topic to the reason Helion is here, besides flirtation and catching up with old friends. Cassian asks if Helion's forces are ready, and he confirms that they are, and they'll rendezvous with the Night Court forces in the mountain range where they share a border. Once they meet up, the plan is to push south Together, the Night and Day armies will join with Thesan's forces in the Dawn Court. The three of them will then keep going south to camp along Khaleesi's Winter Court border to be positioned near the Summer Court. Helion mentions that Beren probably won't make the same mistakes as he did last war, because even his own wife remembers the losses. Remember, we were talking about all those games that he played and the losses and such earlier. This makes Feyre carefully ask him what he means by that. And so Helion begins sharing the story. The Lady of Autumn was sold off to Beren, much like Mor was supposed to marry Aerys at a young age for family political gain. During the war, Hybern went after the Lady of Autumn's family estate because Hybern forces were swarming the lands of Prythian, and they tormented and butchered her two sisters, who she was very close with. Her sisters bought her time to escape, but Hybern's beasts still found her. Helion came to the rescue and saved her from these beasts, which led to the start of a decades-long affair between the two of them.
Hearing the story of the Lady of Autumn and how she and her sisters were, they were super close, she loved them fiercely, and how she chose to stay with a man who she married at the age of 20. Quick pause, actually, quick aside. Feyre is like, oh my God, 20 is so young. Feyre, that is how old you were when you almost married Tamlin. And that is how old you were when you married Rhys.
Well, that's how old she is right now. Her 21st birthday is in Frost and Starlight.
She's like, that's so young. It's like, look in a mirror. Like, that's how old you are now. And I get like that there's like, she's lived through so much that she feels like she's older. But anyway, the more that we learn about the Lady of Autumn, the more it makes me think that she is here to symbolize, maybe not starkly, but have like that minor symbolism for what life would have been like for Feyre if she had stayed with Tamlin. Is Tamlin as bad as Beren? No. Beren is purposely aggressive and cruel, leaving bruises where only he can see them on the Lady of Autumn. But Tamlin was unintentionally aggressive with his angry outbursts. And as he showed during the meeting, he has the capacity to be fucking cruel too. Do I think that this is the only purpose of having Lady of Autumn on the page? No, of course not. I think she's here to show us truly how awful Beren is. And I'm assuming that there's going to be more with her and Lucien with his storyline later. And who knows, maybe Lucien and Aerys will band together and save their mother, or she'll finally be free of Beren when they kill him, hopefully. But especially how Helion highlights how she chose to stay with Beren. It's giving very much the, like, if Feyre chose to stay with Tamlin vibes.
Well, while there is emphasis on the Lady of Autumn's choice, I think Helion captures the true nature of the situation well when Feyre judges him for not stepping in.
Yeah.
Quote, "And with the protocols and rules, lady, you will find that most situations like the one you were in do not end well for those who interfere." In so many words, he is telling Feyre that she does not have a high horse to sit on here. She was lucky to be in a unique situation where she got her happily ever after. But not everyone has that same freedom or circumstances to safely choose their heart's desire. He may be heartbroken for how things ended with the Lady of Autumn, yet he still defends her right here with her difficult decision to sacrifice her own happiness and safety for Helion's safety, for possibly even her children's safety. All these centuries later, his love for the Lady of Autumn and sadness for how things ended and what has resulted for her, it weighs on him greatly. Can you imagine what it was like for him and the lady being in such close quarters under the mountain, not able to talk to each other, barely able to look at one another as they experienced all of these horrors?
Oh, ow. Oh, my heart.
I never thought of that before either.
That.
Yeah.
Oh. We, however, do not only get a download about the sad story of two star-crossed lovers. We get some family drama. As Feyre is listening to Helion's story, she starts to put some things together. Love that this is after she's like, I'm not going to get into this. I'm not going to get in the middle of this. And then she immediately gets into the middle of this.
I love our girl. But I think she does have an air of superiority in this instance because she chose happiness and love. And yes, it did work out so well for her.
So as we know, Helion and the Lady of Autumn had an affair for decades. Then she chose to stay with Beren, and centuries went by with her being treated terribly by him. Feyre does some quick mental math, and honestly, Lexi would be proud of the mental math that Feyre does, because Lucien would have been born not long after the affair ended. And as Feyre notes, their noses, smile, and even their voices are the same. Plus, Lucien's skin color is darker than the pale pallor of his brothers. It would also explain why Beren detests Lucien so much more, and why Lucien is the Lady of Autumn's favorite son, because she was the son she dreamed of having with the man she loved. But in terms of who knows the secret, we have Lady of Autumn Eris, which is why he never hated Lucien, because Lucien was never a threat to his throne, and Baron, who most likely discovered the secret affair when she became pregnant. However, who does not know about this family secret? Assumably Helion, although that's what Fae-vorite and Rhys believe. We do not have that confirmed, but we can highly assume, considering that they're in the same room at the end of this book and there's no weird awkwardness, but who knows? And then, of course, the number one guy is Lucien, has no idea all of this is happening. And this is yet another thing that everyone else knows and Lucien doesn't. So what does this mean for the future? Lucien is Helion's sole heir to the Day Court. Fucking deserve, give Smarty Pants Lucien a High Lord's role, please. Now, I fully believe that by the end of the series, Lucien will be the High Lord of Day, which does sadly mean that Helion will not be around anymore, which sucks. I love Helion, but I don't see a scenario where the series ends where this plot point isn't tied up with a bow.
Or it could be acknowledged that he is the heir to Helion's throne, and the series ends with Helion taking him under his wing and showing him the ways of the Day Court, and Lucien will ride off into the sunset on his own red Pegasus.
I think Helion's dying.
No,
sounds good.
I don't want him to. I know you don't either.
I don't want him to die. I do not. I love Helion, but also, who's the bigger character, Lucien or Helion?
That is true. And it could also be setting it up for he will become the High Lord of Day someday. But first, he has to be the heir.
I will say one of the things that I'm desperately hoping for in a future ACOWAR book is being inside Lucien's head, like being in his POV. Doesn't need to be in an I POV or in a first person POV, but like how Silver Flames is when he learns this information about Helion. Because I imagine that the fact that everyone else fucking knows about this but him, it's not going to sit very well for him. And he's going to have some really conflicting feelings. And I really want to experience that with him. Like I feel like we've been on this ride with him and I just want to like hug him and tell him everything's okay. I love Lucien.
Yes, I agree that he will be a little bit peeved that he's one of the last people to find out about this. And I think that there will also be a lot of relief mixed in there.
That's true.
He isn't Baron's son. For a guy who has disowned his family name and tries to distance himself from the Autumn Court father and brothers, this is great news for Lucien. So while I do see him being upset of being one of the last people to find out, I do think that will be very small compared to the bigger picture and the bigger emotions that he'll feel.
That's a great point. Yeah.
As Nesta enters the room, we learn that something feels wrong to her. She doesn't care who Helion is. I love how she just dismisses him. She just needs to tell her sister that something is off and they need to leave right now. I feel for Nesta because she doesn't understand her powers and can't describe this feeling she has better than she is already trying to convey it. And Feyre... oh dear. I'm not meaning to be so against her this episode. Like, I promise.
Wow. Just write an L on the forehead of Feyre, darling. I swear.
She wants to understand Nesta, but she is also like, well, it's probably just everyone's powers because no one else is picking up on this. She trusts Rhys and the others' alarm bells because of how powerful and experienced with that power they all are. Feyre is forgetting that because her sister is made from the Cauldron, she is different. Now, our crew doesn't realize how connected Nesta is to the Cauldron yet. All they know at this time is that she took power from the Cauldron and it is no longer at full strength because of her. That does not mean that there is a direct connection that she has with the Cauldron. From Feyre's perspective, I get it. They have important business here in the Dawn Court and can't just leave because her sister says something is wrong. And she tries to validate Nesta's feelings, but it falls a little flat when she follows it with a but. Feyre doesn't understand her sister's powers. No one does, not even Nesta. And therefore, she doesn't give her feelings as much credit as they truly deserve. She's very much got an I know better than you attitude right here. But you know who does give Nesta validation? Cassian, of course, because he enters the chat and says, not even asks with a question mark, what's wrong? He immediately trusts Nesta's judgment. Feyre even waits for him to give the same dismissal that she's giving, but our Batboy is smarter than that and more in tune with Nesta. Nesta would never be this outwardly distraught and concerned if she wasn't really serious about something being wrong. And yes, Feyre does recognize that, but again, she is being a little bit like, I know better than you, and she is being dismissive here. I also feel for Nesta so much because she can't explain it, like I was saying. She doesn't understand her connection to the cauldron or its powers, so she's just doing her best to convey this vague warning. And since she can't articulate what's happening, all she can do is emphasize it with her tone and persistence. Cassian understands this about her and asks her the same question, but in a different way to help her navigate how to word what she is feeling. Go, Cassian. That's all I have to say. And just step aside, Feyre.
So Rhys, Azriel, and Cassian all take to the skies, but alas, they cannot find anything of note in the palace, the skies, the land, anywhere. Even checking with Amryn and Valaris on, the state of the city and on Elaine, which all of this makes sense. They would have needed to go very, very far, either to Hybern to feel the cauldron building up power again. That's assuming that the cauldron isn't in the spring court, or they would need to go to the wall itself. And because I'm assuming that the wall's getting all roiled up to come down. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I'm confused now because I guess I thought the cauldron is in the spring court and not in Hybern right now, because it needs to be present to take advantage of the cracks in the wall, which was why the Hybern twins were examining them in the first place, so the cauldron could replicate the breakage and then shatter the wall.
But despite finding nothing, they do not believe that Nesta made it up, given her power and connection to the cauldron.
Feyre even wonders if Nesta is experiencing the same emotional trauma like what still stalks her some nights. So I shouldn't say that she is dismissing Nesta here and doesn't believe her. She does believe her. She does think that Nesta thinks that something is wrong. But that's the key word there. Nesta thinks something is wrong. Little do they all know, Nesta feels something is wrong because the cauldron is gathering power and preparing for the next day's big unleash. It's not a surprise that no one can find anything wrong, since, like you were saying, Nicole, it's impossible for anyone else to sense the cauldron getting ready for the big boom so far away. After dinner, Feyre and Rhys retire to their bedroom and have a little recap of the day. Miss Busybody asks why Mor and Helion are hooking up when it's the worst thing possible to do to Azriel. And Rhys, speaking for everyone, is like, honey, it's none of our business. They need to figure this out for themselves because it's their life. If I had $1 for every time he's told her that and she didn't listen. He does, however, note that Azriel will eventually have to decide if he's going to fight for Mor or let her go. And something bigger than a male insulting Mor or her taking one to her bed will initiate that fork in the road. Yes, like a certain Archeron sister. And speaking of Archeron sisters, you know who also has to decide some things soon? Cassian. I love how Rhys openly is like, who knows if they're mates? It's officially on the page now. I think this is the first time that Cassian and Nesta being mates is right there on the page.
Yeah, exactly. There's a few things I want to note from this scene. Rhys says that Tamlin still loves Feyre. And wow, Tamlin, what a way to show it. But Tamlin did have a slip up earlier in the meeting. He said, quote, I bartered access to my lands to get back the woman I love from a sadist who plays with minds as if they are toys. Love. That's present tense. That's not loved. This is a huge foreshadowing moment for us as we go into the Hybern escape scene where Tamlin helps Feyre get off the ground and quite literally saves her life. Another moment I want to highlight is Feyre sharing with Rhys that even though she thinks it means nothing, she's really proud of him. And he says, quote, it doesn't mean nothing. That you feel that way about me, about today, it means his wing curved closer around me. I don't have the words to tell you what it means. But as that love and joy and light shimmered through the bond, I understood. My freaking heart. I love this so much. And a friendly reminder to us all to remind our partners that we are really proud of them, even when it does not feel like it needs to be said. It always needs to be said. And it just goes back to this book not being about the tension of a budding relationship. It's about a deep, settled love between two people. Last but not least, Feyre telling Rhys that she doesn't think she can have sex in this room because Tamlin is somewhere up in this palace and it quite frankly just does not feel right. Not to spare Tamlin's feelings, at least I highly don't think so, but it does make so much sense. And what kills me here is that she starts to apologize to Rhys as if she was worried that she's letting Rhys down because she's not all turned on and hot and bothered right now. But he stops her, telling her that she never has to apologize. Good man, best man, number one book boyfriend for a reason. I fucking love you. Because this is a whole other type of intimacy between these two. To just lay in bed and be held, expect nothing, and just be showered in support after a long day. As Feyre thinks, quote, our souls intertwined, holding tight. As I was writing this, I literally said, BRB, I have to go hug Brett. This does make me wonder, though, not to do a hard pivot, but how many nights do you think they like get in bed together and don't fuck?
Because never. I don't think it's ever happened once yet.
That is wild. Move on.
But two other somebodies did get freaky last night. Helion and Moore. Bang, bang, bangity bang. Oh, wait, they don't have that I just had sex and it feels so good glow the next morning. Moore's eyes are actually vacant and she's pale at breakfast. It's like this dullness to her usually bright and vibrant self. So let's talk about this. Because Helion and Moore slept with each other more as a distraction from their own tangled love lives with the people they can't have. Helion feels a shadow of his past with the Lady of Autumn, and his lost love is weighing on him, especially after seeing her again today in such close proximity with her horrible husband. As Moore will say later, quote, he wanted a distraction from his own problems. And then we have why Moore slept with Helion, the way that Azriel scared Moore with his attack on Eris. It was his own way of showing his undying love for her. So like any mature person, Moore turns to Helion instead of facing Azriel and dealing with their issues. This song and dance has been working for 500 years, right? Right? Feyre seems to be under the impression that Moore wants Azriel, but is too scared to embrace their feelings for each other. And it's obvious that Azriel loves her. But as Rhys points out, Azriel thinks that Moore is happier without him in that way, and he is unworthy of her. We will later learn that Moore prefers females, and that is the reason why she doesn't confront Azriel's love for her. She likes sleeping with males, but she is more attracted to females and connects with them on a much deeper level. She didn't want Helion in more ways than one. She doesn't want others looking too closely into who she truly is, especially Azriel. Moore says in her confession to Feyre later in ACOWAR, quote, whenever Azriel makes his feelings clear, like he did with Eris, it's stupid. I know. It's so stupid and cruel that I do this, but I slept with Helion just to remind Azriel. Gods, I can't even say it. It sounds even worse saying it. And then Feyre will finish for her, quote, to remind him that you're not interested. Is anybody surprised that I might have some feelings about Moore's reasoning? Because I agree with her that it is stupid and cruel, and I personally struggle with understanding her reasoning behind all of this. And I am also very careful how I'm saying this because I am really trying to be respectful of the position that Moore is in and the secret that is absolutely hers to share only when she is ready. Because I don't feel like it is my place to criticize her choices when I personally am not in her shoes. I'll be honest, it's hard to navigate this part of the deep dive when I genuinely want to honor and respect Moore and her secrets, and I disagree with her approach and how she strings Azriel along, using sex with others to remind him that she's not interested when one difficult conversation could save the long-term drama.
There is such a difference between not wanting to share a secret, but also not wanting to string on a guy for 500 years versus not wanting to share a secret and acting immature by showing Azriel she's not interested. She went to bed with Helion more to hurt/make a point to Azriel rather than for herself, right?
Yep.
Now, like you're saying, this is not entirely on her. Azriel has the ability to talk to her about this too.
Yes.
He did try 500 years ago and Moore fled the scene, basically. But it's been 500 years, and if watching her take others to bed really does hurt him, it is also on him to talk to her and tell her his feelings. Not exactly something he is known for, to be fair. As much shit as we give Feyre on this podcast for being immature, I'm going to give Moore a big stamp of immaturity here. Not because of the situation she's in by any means, but because of how she is handling Azriel's feelings, who she claims to love. She claims to love Azriel, and yet she's like, I slept with Helion so that Azriel would get off my back, basically.
Yes, and to be clear, love in a platonic way. And yes, you absolutely hit the nail on the head with Azriel equally as being immature in all of this. And it's this song and dance that they are playing with one another that is so avoidable. And Moore sleeping with Helion. Yeah, and Moore sleeping with Helion to literally prove to Azriel to distance herself from him. That's a conversation that needs to be had.
Desperately.
Yes.
Desperately. Thank God for Elaine. Thank God for Elaine. Earlier in their suite, when they first enter, Mor and Cassian go straight to the couch, and Cassian starts to rub her feet as Azriel goes to, be Azriel. Their immediate, major air quotes, normal roles to, have Cassian as the buffer come right back into play. So I do have a question for you, because the next morning in the dining room, we learn that Azriel and Cassian, while Mor was fucking Helion, Azriel and Cassian went off somewhere into the night. Where do you think they went?
Probably doing their own patrol around the palace all night. Or you know what else? This is my headcanon. They were pranking Tamlin like they're 10-year-old boys at a sleepover. Like, I have no idea what
That's the immaturity I'm here for.
Yeah, like that. Like they get like a cup of warm water and they put Tamlin's hand in it so he pees the bed.
I thought they just went and got drunk somewhere. Honestly, they probably went patrolled or went and worked out or something. Or Cassian went and did training with him, seeing that Azriel needed to let off some steam. I like Tamlin a lot, pranking Tamlin a lot more. Okay, let's get into Fit Watch Day 2. Feyre, while keeping the crown from yesterday, swapped out her Starfall dress for a glittering black made of silk topped with a shimmering obsidian gossamer. And the sleeves are all tapered to points that end in a onyx ring around her middle finger. She says, quote, "If I was a fallen star yesterday, today Rhys's mysterious clothier had made me into the queen of the night." I love it. We know that the rest of the inner circle dressed accordingly, but that's about it. She thinks, quote, "Yesterday we had been ourselves, open and friendly and caring." Debatable.
I have some things to say about that.
Today we showed the other courts what we'd unleash upon our enemies, what we were capable of if we were provoked. Go for it, Lex.
Okay. Open and friendly and caring. 2 of you physically attacked and literally tried to kill people yesterday. I'm pretty sure they already saw what the Night Court is capable of if provoked. I think there's even a line during the High Lords meeting after Rhys shuts Tamlin up and everybody's just quiet because they realize how powerful he is. They realize what he is capable of.
If provoked.
I have no words. I have no words. You tried to kill people yesterday. No wonder Thesan, when they walk into the room, he's like, "Oh, dear God."
I think if I'm learning anything in this deep dive of the High Lords meeting, Thesan's my favorite character. I love this dude so much. Oh my God.
I am too practical right now for the Night Court shenanigans. All right, but anyway, day 2 of the meeting starts. Helion says that if Tamlin can rally his forces, then Tamlin and Tarquin can hold the front lines long enough for the Solar Courts to bring the larger hosts. Just like Helion was saying to our crew last night, how their forces can meet up and start moving south toward Winter Court's border with Summer Court. Except Tamlin's like, "Well, Feyre destroyed my people's faith in me. There's these consequences of her revenge again." Although, when it comes to centuries, Tamlin, you openly chose Ianthe when you knew she was lying and made one of your men pay the price. That incident was not on Feyre, mostly. Those were his decisions. Same goes for when he had his magical outburst and she didn't hide the bruises. Like you were saying, Nicole, she was doing some manipulating, yes, but it was ultimately Tamlin's actions.
Yes.
So he was by no means an innocent victim of her wrath. Yes, she definitely did play a big part of it, as we have also discussed, but there's a line. There's a line about what she was responsible for and what he was responsible for. And it's gray and it's tiny, but it's there. But enough of that, because, oh dear, Nesta stumbles out of her chair and she is clutching her chest, clearly in terrible pain and confusion. She throws up into the reflection pool. Something is definitely wrong, everybody. Kallias, understandably, worries if she's been poisoned. Helion and Thesan do their doctor scans on her, but neither detect anything that requires healing or spell cleaving. Nesta forces out that nothing is wrong with her, and that's when it dawns on Feyre. It's the Cauldron! Dun, dun, dun. Nesta's own power is so closely bound to the Cauldron that its dreadful presence, when awoken, goes through her too. She serves as a warning bell, so to speak, which was another reason the king hunted her down. So these past, 12 hours or so have been the Cauldron waking up and drawing power for this big stunt. And right at the realization that what's wrong is actually the Cauldron, there is a shuddering through the earth, through air and stone and green growing things, quote, as if some great god blew the breath across the land. Then there's a strong impact, making the whole mountain shake and the building sway. And no, it's not Rhys coming this time. This is such a perfect description of the world impact of the wall shattering. Because remember... This is such a perfect description of the world impact of the wall shattering, because remember, this wall is extremely powerful and has divided the magical land from the mortal realms. This isn't just a wall crumbling like a building. This is concentrated, controlling power rippling across the world. So of course its impact is felt everywhere. To be honest, I'm surprised the mortal realm, like Feyre's village, is still standing after the earthquake equivalent, considering how intense it was here halfway across Prythian. Like, how is Grayson's manor still standing when they go to it next episode? Anyway, Rhys spears his magic, quote, a shooting star across the land. I love simple magical descriptions like this, where his magic can reach that far to feel for what happened. He is indeed able to confirm the very, very, very bad news. The wall is gone, both across Prythian and on the continent.
This really sucks a big one for this whole crew, because yesterday they tried to band together and fight against this mighty force. And this was their day to hopefully be proactive mode and, quite frankly, really change the state of the war and get some hope again on their side. And yet, again, this is just another way Hybern was 2 steps ahead of them. So they're having to, again, go back on that defense, playing catch up. And they were really hoping to get shit together here. And unfortunately, that did not happen.
It cannot be underestimated how big of a deal it is that the wall has come down. The wall prevented Fae from entering the mortal lands. It kept these two peoples separate, creating a barrier for the magic in the fairy realms. Now that protection for the mortals is gone, and there is nothing to stop Hybern from marching on the humans and retaking their land, enslaving them once again, and putting them in their place while the Fae rule the world like before 500 years ago. The only thing stopping him now is the courts. Thank goodness they are all already together, allied and jumping into action. But what was previously, we don't have time, we need to hurry before Hybern makes a big move, is now we need to move now. And that is certainly what they're going to do. Let's turn our full attention to foreshadowing important moments in the rest of this book and the rest of the series.
More, as they're walking into the meeting, is muttering mercy from mates. Mates, that is plural. This is right after Cassian and Nesta had their moment in the foyer. So do you think she, like Rhys, has a hunch that possibly Nesta and Cassian are mates too?
I don't think that she was referring to Cassian and Nesta when she was talking about mates right there, but Rhys certainly does think so. So maybe? Feyre tells Rhys mind to mind that she might need to have this reflection pool, and Rhys says that he'll make a note of it for her birthday. Well, he gives her a whole piece of riverfront land to build a house for her birthday. So the big question is, does the river house have a reflection pool? And if so, who wants to bet Cassian falls in first?
If Xaden Ryerson fell into the reflection pool at a certain area, then Cassian would absolutely be the first person to fall into this here. Tamlin saying that he thinks Rhys and Feyre are working together to be the king and queen of Prythian. While that is absolutely not what our duo is here to do, if Amryn had any say in it, yes, and it will be her motive in Silver Flames, which is wild. And last but not least, Eris staring at Nesta during the meeting, considering he will literally be proposing to her in a little over a year. Wild. Friends, let us begin our sipping tea with a Suriel. Every episode, Lexi will sit down with a Suriel, sip some tea, and walk us through a world-building topic to help us better understand this world and the people in it, specifically the people in it this round.
Today's Suriel topic, like I mentioned earlier, is Helion and the Lady of the Autumn Court. This is a highly requested Suriel Teatime, so today we're going to walk through their entire backstory and the consequences of this affair. Now, I do also want to give a trigger warning for today's Suriel topic because we are going to be discussing domestic abuse. Let's start with who the Lady of the Autumn Court is. She is a high fae who was born to a prominent family in the Autumn Court, approximately 40 years before the war 500 years ago. She was full of life, all brightness and smiles. Her family, in pursuit of political alliances within the court, married her off at 20 years old to Baron Vincera, the High Lord of the Autumn Court, or at least we assume that he was already High Lord. She was deemed a good match for the High Lord because of her powerful bloodline and firebending. But there was a rumor that she waited before agreeing agreeing to the marriage because she had met someone the year before at the Equinox Ball, that someone being Helion. However, Helion more or less confirms that she had no choice in the matter of marriage and was actually sold off to Baron. During the war, almost 20 years after she married Baron, the two of them had several young children together. The exact number of children is unknown, but we can assume at least Aerys and one of his brothers. Hybern's forces were invading the Autumn Court territory, so Baron strategically spread out his bloodline throughout his court. So his wife went to stay at her family estate with her two sisters, while their young sons went elsewhere to other relatives. It is said that Baron played games in the war and it cost him dearly. His people, including his wife, remember his losing choices. While we don't know what specific choices he made, we do know what it cost the Lady of Autumn. Because Hybern attacked the Lady of the Autumn Court's estate, and because her sisters dearly loved her, they stayed behind to buy the lady time to escape and convinced her to get out. As a result, her sisters unfortunately were brutally tortured and butchered by Hybern and their beasts. The Lady of Autumn ran, but she was eventually cornered by Hybern's beasts because they were faster and stronger. She was cornered at a ravine, trapped atop a ledge with the beasts snapping at her feet. But what's that? Helion came to the rescue! He ripped the beasts apart with his bare hands and saved her. And that's when their decades-long on and off affair began. Sufficient to say, we can gather Baron never learned of how Helion saved her from certain death, since him saving her, led to this affair. Decades later, Baron found out about this affair. We can assume because the Lady of Autumn was pregnant with Lucien. And quick pause, because I think I just realized that maybe the reason that it was an on again and off again affair was because she had, at least 4 more sons in between when they started their affair and when she had Lucien. So I'm sure that, her being pregnant with Baron's children and being postpartum and whatnot might have been the off part of their affairs. Anyway, Baron was suspicious that Lucien was not his, but he was unable to prove whether or not the boy was his son. Rhys is convinced that Baron debated killing the lady for the betrayal, but because Lucien could pass as his son, he probably just had enough doubt of who exactly sired Lucien to hold off any drastic measures and make a public scene. Lucien inherited the power of fire that Baron himself has, and Lucien of course has red hair, but this is all actually from the Lady of Autumn, because remember, her family is so powerful that they also wield the same power, so it still runs in his bloodline even without Baron. The Lady of the Autumn Court chose to end the affair with Helion instead of leave her husband. With the protocols and rules in place within the courts, it was dangerous for anyone to interfere in a High Lord's marriage. I assume a big part of this choice was to keep Helion safe from the repercussions of leaving Baron and avoid all-out court conflict. Learning of the affair led Baron to punish his wife, and he continues to abuse her 400 years later. He belittles her and leaves bruises where no one but him will see them, and she is now a shell of that bright light she used to be, withdrawn and solemn. The Lady of the Autumn Court favored Lucien above her other sons because he was the child she always wanted with the male she loved. Baron and his brothers, however, have always hated Lucien and tormented him his entire life because he is not one of them. Baron may not be able to prove it, but he knows deep in his heart Lucien is not his son. And Aerys has never wanted Lucien dead because he knows that his younger brother is not a threat to the High Lord of Autumn title like his other brothers are. Lucien may be passable as Baron's, but his nose is the same as Helion's, as well as his smile and voice. His skin is even darker than his brother's. Helion, of course, has dark-colored skin. In addition to his mother's fire, we theorize he may have his father's spell-cleaving powers as well because he was able to break free of Hybern's spell on him and Tamlin at the end of ACOWAR. Again, that is just a theory that we have. We have not seen it in any other capacity, but I'll also argue we don't really see Lucien with fire either, so maybe he just doesn't use his magical abilities that often.
I think so, yeah.
So what does this all mean for our story? Well, not much in the short term. Lucien is currently on the continent searching for Vassa and not even present in our story right now. Baron will never publicly address it because that would mean that he has to admit that his possession, aka his wife, made a fool of him. As Helion says, they continued their little dance all these centuries later. He and the Lady of Autumn sneak quick glances at each other, but that's the extent of it. But this revelation that Lucien is Helion's son may be quite significant in the long run because this means that Lucien is actually the only heir to the Day Court. So he theoretically will become High Lord of the Day Court after Helion passes, like we've been talking about. And that, friends, is our Suriel Teatime on Helion and the Lady of the Autumn Court.
Let us close out this episode because remember, we do not have a Maas vs. Madness today with our favorite moments.
The Night Court has some pretty crazy first days, huh? First, we have Farrah's first day going to the prison to meet the bone carver, and then her second day was facing off with the weaver. Now Nesta is going to be the most vulnerable she's ever been to the 7 most powerful beings in the land. All the betting with when the first fight starts, especially with Rhys having to tell his friends no cheating by provoking fights. We can all laugh about that. And then Helion ends up winning with his own bet the day court separately made. No wonder they're buds.
Rhys also telling everyone that it's time for everyone to know who really has the biggest wingspan. This is a question that will haunt the fandom until we get an Azriel book, but I do have pretty firm confidence that based on descriptions in Silver Flame, Rhys does not have the biggest wingspan. I love Helion's freaking powers. He makes copies of all Tamlin's papers that he brought. He hovers a hand over them and then just absorbs all the info. What I would have given for this during school. Nesta handing Baron his own ass, telling him, quote, that bastard may wind up being the only person standing in the way of Hybern's forces and your people. And then Cassian being all super touched, looking at her as if he's never seen her before, which is kind of true because this is the first time she's really coming to his defense like this. And everything from Vivian in this stretch, particularly how she speaks to Baron, and of course her asking Callias why she cannot be High Lady. Quick side note, do you think he actually ever made her High Lady?
No, and I think that actually calls into question about how you become a High Lord and how you are power. And because Farrah was given the power of all 7 High Lords, I have to wonder if she has more of that capability of being High Lady versus someone who is, I'll say, just the mate of a High Lord.
Yes, I think you are right.
And that, friends, is our big episode, the High Lords meeting. Whew.
We have been recording since 9 a.m. It is 3 o'clock. I'm going to go nap.
Like we mentioned, we do not have a Mass vs. Madness today, but guess what? We do have amazing Inner Circle Patreon members to celebrate. So, Nicole, why don't you kick us off with our fantastic Inner Circle Patreon members? We love you.
Kate, Shannon K, Tiffany D, Autumn, Kathleen H, Allison W, and Yesenia. Thank you all so much for being at Inner Circle.
Next Monday is episode 8, where we're covering chapters 49 through 60. Grab your battle gear, friends, and your tissues, because you bet your booty the Suriel gets an obituary. And real quickly, like a little behind the scenes thing, Nicole and I, we record obviously well in advance. And so this coming week, we are going to be going to the Dragon Gauntlet. And so we have to record 2 days earlier than usual. And of course, we have 2 less days to prepare, and it is a huge episode where we are covering 11 chapters. Why do we do this to ourselves?
We have never done 11 chapters in our entire life. If we're not here next week, it's because we passed on. That's why it actually killed us. We also have a new line of merch. Line is not even, we have so much new merch, and we also have it all in a new merch store. You can find the link in the show notes, and happy shopping.
And if you are interested in joining the Patreon party, maybe you want a name shout out at the end of the episode too, please do consider going to patreon.com/fantasyfangirls. We appreciate your support so much.
Thank you as always to our executive producer Hayden, aka our sanity manager. Thank God for you, good sir.
Thank God for Hayden. Oh my goodness. And of course, you know the drill. If you're not following us on TikTok and Instagram, what are you doing? Give us a follow at Fantasy Fangirls Pod.
Also take a moment to rate and review the show. It takes 2 seconds to hit that 5-star button on your favorite podcasting platform. And it's one of the best things you can do for not only this show, but any of the shows you listen to. And if you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button to never miss an episode. And last but not least, do not forget to share this episode with your fellow High Lords meeting loving friends. Let them also have a fuck you Tamlin count. I think the count was 8.
I think that was the final count.
Lower. I thought it was going to be more than that. 8 is good. 8 is fine. He deserves more, but it's fine. Thank you, friends, for listening. I need to go to bed.
Bye.
Bye. The palace has grand balconies, archways, verandas, brides, bridges.
There's brides all over the place.
It's everywhere. They pass by open-aired chambers filled with sick pillows, man. But as he continues to dig himself a deeper asshole, what?